All good. Hey, look, mate, really appreciate you spending the time with us too, man. It's we've been trying to tee this up for bloody 3 weeks now, I think, and it's great now that we're able to get some time just to chill out for a nice Friday night and have a good yap. You and I, man, we've got longer history than most, haven't we? We've been around each other. I reckon the first time I met you was in 87.
87?
87 at the Patch.
At the Patch? I reckon I might have met you even before that at the Patch. So, right. 87, we won Club Nationals with that, with Keith and Wayne and those guys.
Yeah.
And I think we might have been, I think I might have seen you maybe a year or so before that, possibly 85, 86, I think. Yeah, I remember, guy, when I met you, you were genuinely still a kid, you know?
Yeah, I was 12, 13 years old, mate. I wasn't old at all. I was just a young kid running around the court, loving it. So yeah, that's interesting, man. Had you been in indoor much longer before that?
No, look, I hadn't. When I was at Westlake, one of the things I was asked to do was asked to help a guy who moved up from Christchurch to show him around the school, and that was Dave Ponting. So me and Dave were mates, and he started playing a bit of indoor, and I sort of got piggybacked to some sides from the Berkeley Cricket Club. I was the worst player on every side I ever played in, but I got some quite good sides. And Dave made the New Zealand side, and it kind of really got my interest going in it. You know, I was a bit more. You know, I went to watch a few provincial championships and those kind of things before I sort of got involved in that sort of cricket patch era, if you like.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Dave was a great bat. I remember Dave very fondly. Actually, he was just a really, really strong player, good fielder, good bat, could bowl a bit. He wasn't too bad at all, man.
Yeah, mate. So on that side.
Yeah. So the Patch, for people that don't know, so Cricket Patch was quite a unique sort of centre. I mean, for us that were involved there, we felt it was the best centre ever designed, ever made. But it was, you'd walk in the centre, and then the courts were separated lengthways with you had an upstairs, downstairs sort of mezzanine in the middle to view the games, and very tight down the brick walls down the side. But in terms of being able to view a game and the atmosphere and the sound, just incredible, you know, like it was really quite raw and quite an intimate sort of setup.
Yeah, amazing. It was, you look back on those, Colsey, and those games really did have a lot of atmosphere. We probably only really had 20 people watching, but it felt like you had 200 people watching every time you played there. You know, it just had a buzz to the whole place, right?
Yeah, and there's I'll remember it till the day I die, but there was a TV ad going around that time by is it Born Vita, Better by Far? Yeah, Born Vita, Better by Far. Aussie ad probably. But we'd changed that to Cricket Patch, Better by Far, and it was just become an iconic saying in amongst that whole group. Not just Super League, but the whole centre, right? The whole culture was just so close.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, Colsey. You know, that's probably, I'm 54 and I won my first nationals at 20, so it's 34, 35 years ago, and yet, you know, a lot of the core people from the cricket patch are still in touch in some way. The team I coached, I've got 10 of them as mates on Facebook, and a lot of other people from that era who were still loosely in touch with. And I think that sort of talks about how bonded we were as a group of people down that place. It was a cool place to hang out, and we had a lot of fun together and got together and played some good cricket.
You were really young for that first championship that you coached. Talk us through that, man, because you were the same age as the guys playing, if not touch younger, right?
Yeah, look, I guess that's just part of not being a very good player. I played in some A grade teams, which one of them my mum sponsored, and a lot of good players played in it. We left was Glenfield Indoor Sports. We won the A grade comp there, went up to a cricket patch, and we were playing the A grade comp there, and the guys got asked to play in the B grade Super League pre-season tournament, and everyone on my team apart from me got invited.
Well, that's not writing on the wall nice and early on.
I think, to be fair, they did replace me with Chris Pringle, so you know he was okay. He could play a little bit, and they went to the pre-season tournament. They won it, and when they came back, Dave came and saw me the next day and said, "Hey, they've asked us to play A grade Super League, and we'd like you to coach us." And I'd never coached a team. I hadn't even thought about coaching a team, but you know, all my mates were in that team, and you know, we played a lot of cricket together, and we'd won a few A grade comps, and it just seemed like a really cool thing to do. So I started coaching the patch, and I always remember I was quite famous for making players run around the outside of the court. And the reason that the first time I ever did that, I remember walking out on the court and thinking, everyone's looking at me. What am I supposed to do? I know, I'll make them run till I work it out. Okay, lads, run around the outside of the court. So that's how, and really I coached them, and we won a national championship that year as rank outsiders. That was 87. And, it was sort of, again, put that group, on the map as cricket. Well, I mean, a few of them already played some pretty good cricket, but it really put them back on the map as cricketers,
Who were some of the players like at that level who were around that scene at that time? Like obviously in your side, but also like who were you up against as well?
Cricket patch was Tony Watkins, Tony Potham opened the batting. Wayne Anoka batted 2 or 4. Craig Dinkins was in that side. Dave Ponting was in that side, quite often closed. Craig Jenkins, Phil Hollings. So Keith Anoka. So, guys that at that stage, a few of them were really on their way up and hadn't really been seen, but they turned out to be some pretty good cricketers. They were pretty easy to coach, to be honest. And when we were amazingly committed. But I think we played against Kenzie. He played for Chris Cairns, played for Rusty, I think it was. Mm. We won that Nationals. I think we won our last round play game by 5. Our quarter final by 2, our semi final by 1, and our final by about 10. It was all pretty close cricket, But Robbie Kerr was around. I think actually Kerr came back in 89. I think he was out in 87. But Lincoln Dool was around. Gav Dool was around. There's some good cricketers around. So we had Pring. Simon was playing. Simon Dool was playing for. I think at that stage it might have been Royal Oak. Around that sort of era. There were a lot more outdoor cricketers at that stage, sort of involved in indoor cricket, and we were just a bunch of guys who just trained too hard to lose, really.
Mm. In terms of motivation for like players in your group, and we can talk about present time or recent years gone by where you've been coaching, or even back then, what was some of the triggers around motivating those sort of guys? And the players back then were a pretty sort of wild sort of bunch, with all due respect, highly talented, which I'm sure a lot of the guys sort of ran on. They sort of really ran on that talent and not so much maybe preparation, if I can say that. But in terms of leading those guys as a coach, what were you sort of what were you bringing forward to motivate those guys? Because back then was a lot of yell, and I don't mean just you. I mean the whole culture. It was, bar up, get fizz, like really, really high adrenaline stuff.
Yeah, it was really aggressive, and I used to always believe that whenever I wanted our cult side to win, I would just say the F word more often in the pre-match. The more I swore at them, the better they would play. But I think as well, that cricket patch men's side of 87, I think I've never coached a side that trained as hard. We lived that game for 5 or 6 months. We'd play on a Friday night, and there'd be guys at my house from 10 o'clock on Saturday, on Friday morning. We'd meet there during the day. That everyone would wander in. Dave would go and have a Guinness after we finished school and come and join us about 4. We'd head off to the game. I'd play Super League on the Saturday. A lot of the guys would come and watch. And then Sunday we'd be at training, 10 o'clock in the morning. We'd train till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, non-stop physical stuff every week. I used to drive to St Heliers to pick up Watto and Phil Hollings, bring them back, train, drop them back in St Heliers, come back, play a game of indoor cricket. We just lived it. It was our life at that stage. To be honest, I didn't have a lot else in life at that stage. Growing up, I'd been through a bit of a rough period in my life, and indoor cricket really turned up at a good time for me, for meeting some people and doing some things I loved.
Yeah, you and I have had that sort of conversation, I think, via text. It's I think I was in the same boat as well when I was about that age, really searching for something that I could tie myself into without knowing it. I mean, shit, I was 15 years old or 14 years old, but you're searching for this thing that you could possibly be good at, or at least accepted. And I was, and I really struggled with the environment at the same time, because it was very much about giving each other a lot of shit. And because I was the sort of personality who had a lot of, I was quite a sensitive sort of guy, and those sort of things damaged me. They didn't help bind me into the the culture that it actually ended up damaging me in a way, you know. And I don't know how other guys felt back in those times with my sort of age, but it was a quite a upfront, in your face sort of combativeness sort of culture. But at the same time, if you embrace that, they were your brothers all at the same time, you know.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, Guy. I think one of the things that happened at the patch was some success came, and sides became clear. And once they did, you're either in them or out of them. And I think it's a difficult thing to, there's a few guys around the patch at that stage who were also going through some pretty ordinary times in their lives. That stage in the country, there was a lot of unemployment. So a lot of the guys that left school and didn't have jobs, the Colts kind of guys, had a lot of time on their hands. And, they had a tendency to do some things that I'm sure we look back on now and think, weren't great. And, I think there's a few of the young players coming through who didn't get the support they should have got. And, I thought you got a bit unlucky too, Colsey, because when we went to Harbour, I thought you got into the wrong Super League side, and those guys hung you out a little bit. You'd play with some legends of the game, and they'll ask you to close the batting in the Super League final. It's like, Jesus Christ, man, he's 17 years old. Let him hide him somewhere. Don't ask him to do that. So I thought you got the bad end of both ends of that to some degree,
Yeah, I've spoken about that before on here, and half of it's right. Half of what you're saying is absolutely right. The other half is not, because when I had the ball in my hand, something that I was good at, I was given the world, mate.
Yeah.
These guys just thought they're just excited to watch me and do what I do, or do what I did, but then as soon as I got the bat in the hand, it was the complete reverse. It was, shit, where's this going to go? Oh, we'll bat him with Greg Hoff. He'll support him along the way and do everything right and not get out at the other end, while Colsey will get out 6 times, and hey, it'll probably all balance out and even out. It was the complete reverse, and I felt that and read that, and oh, look, hey, you could be right. I was always so happy to have been selected in that side, because I was. For those that are unaware, like we're talking a bunch of Colts. We had a situation at Harbour where we decided to have 2 A-grade Super League sides, and it was because Colts were coming through the grades, but we also had a lot of legends around in the game of playing A-grade Super League as well. So, or what's now called Prems. But so it was about going, well, look, we've got all these players ready to play Premier cricket, so let's split them up into 2 teams, and so we had yourself and a coach. Was it you coaching one side, and it was majority of the Colts with a couple of the top guys, and then it was the rest of the top guys with me, basically, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think somehow it tended out to be like the guys that had come in from other, like Hoffy and those guys weren't the original Harbour guys. They weren't the cricket patch guys. They sort of came in, and you sort of joined up with them. And I know for a while John McMahon coached them, and he was right. Exceptional. But I can't remember if at that stage he was. But when you look back on it, Colsey, I do look at the batting and think that people seem to forget that you had good talent. You have good talent with the bat, and that instead of just wondering about what you were going to do, people really needed to give you some help. And again, they put you in some big pressure situations, and I watched a couple of them and thought, shit, he's just too young. And I think people forgot, Guy, because at that stage you could bowl like a 20-year-old, and people forgot that really, and you could turn a game with the ball, but that didn't mean that, with the bat, it was the right thing to do for you. And I think at times, my feeling was they did the right thing for them and not quite the right thing for you,
You always batted me at 3 or something like that, just to hide you away. Like, you don't do that now. Like, 3 is the crucial partnership, because it absolutely sets up the rest of the game, right? Either chasing or setting. It's a crucial partnership. But back then, it was the time where you just had the partnership in there, and hopefully you made up a few runs in the 4th partnership to get it back.
It's hard to drive it. But again, one of the things with that, Colsey, in those days, quite often a guy would bat who they thought wasn't their best bat. He'd bat 4th when you batted 1st and 3rd when you chased.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't quite do that for you. They just let you, and it could have been full of good intentions, right? They might have thought, well, we'll get 20 runs in front, and he's a good enough bat, we'll be fine from there. But they left you 15 runs to win in a couple of finals where you know, that's a big ask on a kid in an A grade in a premier final, you know, who's a bowler.
I think also, yeah, I think a lot of it's not intended in the same way. Maybe it just wasn't thought through the way that perhaps it would get thought through these days. And maybe they just thought, hey, look, we've got 7 other players on here who can bat, and they're going to play and suck up the rest of it, and guy gets the experience out of it, or whatever that looks like. But yeah, no, interesting times, man. Absolutely no regrets. Like, I just cherish playing with those guys like Keith Anoka, who just took me under his wing and really looked after me.
Brilliant guy.
And he made me really feel like I was involved and part of that group, and gave me a hell of a lot of confidence in behind it. And I'll never regret that. And it was a really cool experience.
It's one of the things, if I can go back in there just for a second, Colsey, at that time, there was a lot of stuff in the culture about toughening people up, and it'll be good for them. And it could well be that the theory was, just to put you under a lot of pressure and you'd learn from that. It could well be very well intentioned. I don't think it worked particularly well. But as you say, you also got the chance to play with some absolute legends. I think Keith and Wayne were both on your side, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
There's 2 decent cricketers and 2 good guys,
Yeah. No, well, hopefully, when all this lockdown stuff, dissipates, if and when it does, hopefully the 3 of us get a chance to sit in a studio and do this, because I don't really want to do it over a Zoom call, because that could end up quite a bit of a mess. But between the 3 of us, like, sitting in a room, it would be pretty cool, because I don't think I'd have to do a lot of talking. I think a few stories would come out, and that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
The way the game was played back then, was really, really different. And look, I've got a few motivations about why I do this podcast, right? And one of them is because, and I'm repeating myself from other podcasts, which I apologize for, everyone, but that I really don't, I'm one of the few guys that have been around since, mid 80s, and saw some absolute amazing cricketers and cricket being played. And I don't want that lost. I don't want that lost on the current generation, or the people who have even been around 10 years and don't even know who Wayne Anoka was, or Dave Ponting, or Phil Hollings, Simon Doolan, what he was in the game. I want future generations to understand who these people were, the pioneers of the hardcore raw indoor cricket that was played back in those days. And you were absolutely a fundamental person who was around those times as well. And that's the sort of stuff that I just don't want to get lost. And that was a real motivation why I wanted to do this. And the other one was how the game was played back then, because it was completely different. And a lot of it was driven by the ball. And in my sort of mind, I think it's the ball made a huge amount of difference.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Colsey, that look, the truth is that indoor cricket sort of boomed and everyone was playing it, and not everyone's super aware of different things. But what we had when we were playing was we had the pivot ball, which skidded on. So you spent your whole day on the front foot, and you were looking to play cricket shots. You were looking to drive the ball, and you didn't dare try and bounce a pivot, because it would just skid you underneath, right? So you were just playing flat all the time, which meant that fielders were in the game all the time. The problem with pivots, and unfortunately, was that they were as hard as a rock, which A-grade players loved, because if you hit a guy with a pivot when you're bowling, you loved it, because you'd hurt him, not kill him or anything, but if you got hit by someone quick with a pivot, you'd hit, right? But the powers that be in Australia decided that because of the insurance laws, they had to have a softer ball. So then turns up the Burley, which has got a tennis ball in her, which is light, so it's dropping and it's popping. And all of a sudden, we're playing off a half step and trying to hit it late and use our hands. And it moved us away from an outdoor cricket technique, which I don't think has been good for indoor cricket. And it hasn't been good for indoor cricket as a spectacle. The truth is now that 20% of the balls go into the roof net and the batsman walk through. And that's not as exciting as when the ball went through it, ankle height, and guys were throwing themselves after the ball and smashing stumps down and giving guys a bit of grief about it. And the ball has changed the dynamic of the game amazingly, but they can't find, as far as I'm aware, they can't find a ball that will skid on that's not hard. There's the lightness of the pivot of the Burley that makes it safe, but it's also what makes it bounce, you know.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you more. Like the other thing that it changes is the quality of the bowling, because
Yes.
people who could just learn to roll their fingers over each side, who didn't have the huge amount of talent to bowl and swing it around and bowl at pace, it gave them weapons, and to me, that's just false, because I worked bloody hard back in the day, and I'm only just one example, but a lot of us worked bloody hard back in the day with the heavier, harder ball to get an off-cutter going and get it going properly. Now, that's probably the reason why it got so good with the Burley as well. But I used to do that with the harder ball, with the pivot. And because I trained so hard for it, and it meant that people who put in the hard work and had a bit of ability and talent got the rewards. Nowadays, you get guys that don't do all of that hard work, or haven't got that ability as an out-and-out strike bowler to be able to move the ball around and have little off cutters and do damage. You know, like it just evens the game up, much like 6 and 8 ball overs. It just evened the game up. It evened players up, and the players who used to, with the harder ball, put in all the hard work and effort, got the rewards. Now you don't have to put that, well, you didn't have. No, I don't mean now. I mean the ball's been around for bloody 20 years now, but that ball, as soon as it changed, it brought players closer together.
Because one of those things, I really agree. And you talked earlier about the change to the game. These days, third partnership wins into cricket, because you've got guys just coming in and bowling fingers. And if guys can't handle it, they get rolled over and you lose. And when we were playing, those bowlers would have come in and bowled that stuff and got banged for 5 because it would have skidded on. I mean, and you're right, you know, Pringles off a boom bounced, right? But it was really rare. And it has changed the game, and it's changed the whole structure. These days, in reality, if you're an outdoor cricketer, opening the batting is a lot easier than batting 3. Because you've got a new Burley that's just got a bit of shine on it, so it's going to skid through a little bit more. It comes on the bat really nicely. Yeah, hands up. Yeah, right. And you can play it nice and late, and it's easy. And third partnership, the damn thing's stopping and bouncing at you, and it's hard to play in there. And it has changed the whole structure of the game. And again, look, I've been a centre owner as well as a coach, as well as a pretty poor player. I understand the Australian centre owners, you know, the insurance thing and the need to have a safe ball. And that, you know, we were having, you know, guys playing mixed cricket and just smashing cricket balls past the face of one.
Yeah, that's wrong. Yeah,
dangerous, right? And it had to be made safer, but it hasn't improved the game in my view.
So in terms of coaching, like, because you coached through that whole period when we changed over to Burley as well, like what were the immediate effects you saw in the way that you had to change your coaching and the structure of the game and how we attacked? What were the sort of things that you can remember sort of coming to mind?
Oh, the biggest thing, I did a session with the cricket patch. I said to the guys one day, I said, training, I said to them, okay, so guys, where are you bowling? And everyone went around, everyone was bowling outside off stump. I said, okay, and when you're batting, where do you like guys bowling to you? And everyone liked guys bowling outside off stump. Because with a pivot, you could go past the bat and bring the keeper into the game, right? And it was a huge part of it, right? Yeah. Whereas with the Burley, you had to come back and land middle and bring the ball back into the body. And but just because of the bounce. So it changed the lines that we were bowling hugely. And because of that, again, when we were playing, and again, I don't want to talk about the old times if they were the only times. This is just about the differences technically of the coach, right? But when you were facing a pivot, you would use a test match batting stance with your toes lined up facing the bowler. And as the Burleys came in, we had to open those stances up so guys could get their hands through their hips and bounce the ball through the leg side. You couldn't bounce a pivot through the leg side very easily. But because the lines changed, the batting techniques changed, and it changed the game. And again, for mine, look, to some degree, 2020 cricket's rescued that because guys, an outdoor bat like that now to open their hips up to swing through. But what it did do was make it harder for guys to transition between indoor and outdoor cricket. In fact, when the Burleys turned up, Scott Stivers told me he would never play in cricket again. And I think he's kept his word. You know, it just didn't work for him as an outdoor cricket player to have the ball popping at him. It wasn't anymore that he had to change his technique to play indoor. And at that stage, he didn't want to change his technique because he had a clear future in outdoor cricket. He didn't want to jeopardize. It was a bloody good decision. But I think it did do some damage in that stuff, you know.
In terms of like, you know, as a coach and watching from the sideline, who are the favorite players that you sort of came across that you really enjoyed watching, like whether they're on the opposition or guys that were under in your team and under your wings and stuff? Like who are the guys you really loved watching over the years?
Look, I always liked, well, I always hated watching Dion Muir play, because generally when he was playing, he was beating us. And
he's the GOAT,
but,
man. Him and
yeah,
Jude Coleman are the GOATs.
I think that's fair, Colsey. I obviously haven't watched Jude play as much, but Dion's the best player I've ever seen. And to do that, you've got to be able to bat, bowl, and field to above international standard. And he could do all of it to well above international standard. He was brilliant to watch. He could turn games. Nick de Grease, another Australian. Obviously I coached in Australia. I coached a couple of state champs with Steve, with ACT, and from New Zealand, Finns. He could turn a game.
Scott Finlay.
Yep. And I think I used to love watching Robbie O play, just because he was a guy who I knew he was just another cricketer who just wouldn't accept that, and just worked and worked and worked to the point where he could play for New Zealand. And we had a trainer tell us in the early days, he'd come down from training with the Blues, I think it was at the time, that Robbie was as fit as some of the professional rugby players. And he would regularly vomit at their training. He would just push himself so hard. And when you saw all that work and then you saw him go out and perform on the biggest stage, I really enjoyed that. I think there's those moments too, Nathan Daly's gloves down the leg side, the keeper when he's stumping somebody. You just watch that and think, that is magic, that guy. And as a coach, that he's trained that and trained that and trained that and trained that. And Bordy was the same. Boyd Jensen down the leg side. And Billy Perkinson was another one down there. They were just, and how hard that stuff is. I think the average spectator just watches that and thinks it's bread and butter. But when you watch them develop, getting down there, so a lot of players I enjoyed watching play. Water was always an excitement machine. You never quite knew what you were going to get with Tony. He was another player who could turn a match your way or turn a match against you pretty quickly. But there's been a loss. I think back in the day, Simon Hayden. It's funny as you go through life. I always respected Robbie Hyman particularly. I think Robbie Hyman's a group of about 5 or 6 batsmen that I could never get. My teams never hurt him. And, I coached a lot of really good bowling and fielding teams, and I felt as if we could hurt just about any batsman. But Robbie Hyman would always come out and score runs against us, and no matter what I tried, he would do that. And you get a lot of respect when you perform against someone,
Yeah. You brought up a really good player, mate, there, because no one will know who he is. Except you guys like yourself, me. I don't think there's anyone else that's in. Look, Corey Todd probably doesn't even know. Robbie Hyman might. But you mentioned Billy Perkinson. So Sean Perkinson is a guy that was in late 80s. He was in the cricket patch Colts. He played a little bit of men's cricket, maybe for patch, but not too much. He was more. He was a keeper and batted 2 in the Colts. He couldn't bowl. He could throw it, but he couldn't bowl.
He could throw it,
and it was his only downfall, because everything else in life, he was almost larger than life, right? I remember going on my first tournament down to Rotorua when Rotorua had the 3-quarter arena. And I got invited into that Colt side. I didn't play a game, all tournament. We won it. But I think Alan Lindstrom might have been a part of that as well. And we didn't play. And on the first night at the Purinui Hotel, Sean Perkinson decided that he would run around all the hotel rooms and marmite all of the doorknobs. All around the hotel, our rooms and everyone else's, I think. Yes, everyone had. I know that there's some more disgusting stories out of that he did. I won't go into those.
I drove past the Purinui about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, and, yeah.
Rebranded, right? I took a photo, sent it to the boys. Remember this place, guys? We got banned one year as the cricket patch and banned the next year as North Harbour.
Oh, absolutely brilliant.
It was a different world, wasn't it?
So funny. So
great
funny,
bad, man. Great bad, and and one of the
wait before you go on,
I want
want to talk about Sean before you go on. So apart from being a larger than life, like really funny guy, he drove me home backwards from Harbour one night too at about 12:30 at night. He drove me home backwards about 3 kilometers. And he all the way home, he was like, "What are the chances, Colsey? What are the chances?" And we drove home backwards all the way. Unbelievable. Anyway, so Sean, without a doubt, is probably the he's, when I talk about the most talented keepers I've ever played with and around or seen, he's top 5 ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he was
As a batsman, he was unbelievable batting it too. He was so solid, played the ball so late, and he had a beautiful outdoor technique and perfect for indoor back with those harder balls back in the day. Just really, really amazing cricketer. And his only downfall, the only reason, there's 2 reasons why he never played for New Zealand. One, he struggled with the ball. He would always get found out at an international level, and his shoulder stuffed out with the throw. He couldn't throw any longer, right? And that pretty much ended his whole career. But that guy would have been known throughout indoor cricket circles for years if he'd kept playing. And that, these are the sort of players that I really want to harness and capture, in this. And the guy was outstanding.
Mate, he was an exceptional keeper, and he was playing a lot of Premier cricket in other countries where he would keep him bat 10 because he was so young. They wouldn't bat him up, but he was just such a good keeper. At the side as a keeper only, and indoor again, I agree, one of the best I've ever seen. And I think a special player. And when his shoulder went and he couldn't play the game anymore competitively, he came back and coached North Harbour to a club nationals in Christchurch. And I respect for guys that do that. It's been really easy to split the dummy. And look, the truth is, these are the things when you look back on your coaching career. Guys like me were teaching Billy to throw, and Billy is Sean's nickname. And these days, someone who knows what they were doing will teach him how to throw. At the end of the day, one of the casualties of cricket in those days was we ruined that boy's shoulder, and we didn't mean to, we didn't intend to, but we didn't. Warming up for the cricket patch guys was walking into the centre. We just didn't know the stuff that they know now, right? And you look back with a little bit of sadness, and that we did. I mean, he's had shoulder surgery and he's strengthened it up, and he's good as gold now. He still plays. Last couple of years ago, he was still playing decent cricket in the UK, where he lives now.
Yeah. What do you the difference? So you mentioned you coached over in Australia a bit, and I remember you and I went on a tour in '97 to ACT, and then Sydney over to Newcastle. That was as sort of like a foes sort of Auckland side that went over, but it involved a couple of their Hamilton guys as well with us, which was an amazing trip. In terms of, it was almost from that period there that you had associated yourself with the Australian guys, right, and sort of started forming some relationships with them.
Yeah, look, I went over once with Auckland and once with Alice Street, I think the next year,
right? And
because I was coaching the Hamilton guys, so we went over and played some clubs, and that's a long time ago. But I remember that Auckland team had a pretty special bond. There was a good group of guys. We had a lot of, again, I think from memory, in the first game on that tour, Andre opened the batting. I don't know why I did stupid things like that. It wasn't,
I don't remember that.
Early on, he's banged a ball on the cut, and it's hit the point fielder in the knee, bounced up and hit his forward, bounced forward onto his hand, hit the stumps, and run the other guy out. -5. It's like, what goes on with this? But I think ACT sorted us out in the first game. But after that, we actually beat the Australian Masters at Wetherill Park on the way through Sydney.
Now, was that the game that Andre hit that guy in the head?
Yeah, Boyston was batting with that guy. Do you know that?
No.
Boyston was his batting partner.
Oh, wow.
And from memory, we had the best bowling attack in the world, and we scored about 130, 140. And these guys were 50 after 4 and hadn't missed one when Andre bounced him in the head. And he had to go. He couldn't keep batting. And and we had that side. We had Andre, we had yourself, we had Spencer. I think we might have had Pickard as well. We had some bowling. Boy, they chased hard. They got pretty close. They were, but
yeah.
England was a bit of
Brian Herman. Brian Herman was in that side as well, and he could bowl too, man.
He bent his nose on that tour, didn't he? That was the Newcastle. He broke his nose, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what are like from there, you sort of form those relationships with the Aussie guys, like, and coached over there. You're assistant coach for for a bit there. What were the fundamental differences that you saw from the New Zealand environment to the Aussie environment? Like, I understand that Australia has so many more players, so much higher level players. They play tough cricket more often. I mean, these are the things that you sort of find out over the years. But like, what were the really key things that you noticed as a coach that were really different and that you tried to bring back on board in New
Look,
Zealand?
I think in that stage, Steve was the guy that organised the tour for Auckland for ACT. We did ACT first, and he organised that. So that was me meeting Steve Hart for the first time, and he invited me back to coach with ACT. I couldn't even tell you what year it is now, but I did 2 or 3 years with ACT. When you got there, yeah, I remember I got on the bus. I can't remember why they picked me up from somewhere. They picked me up from somewhere in Sydney, and I got on the bus, and within maybe 35 seconds, I'd started giving me a bit of grief about being a Kiwi and some sheep jokes, you know. And I retorted pretty quickly. I put them back in their spot pretty quickly, but I gave them some replies they didn't love. But I think that's part of being with the Aussies. You know, you can't just stand there and take the shit from the Aussies, because they don't mean anything from it, but they don't respect you if you don't have a little bit of something coming back. But the real difference for mine, I think you've touched on it, guys, that when you're coaching top level players in Australia, they've played so many high level tournaments against so many good players that they know they're going to be okay in big moments. And the level from those Australian Open championships to international, I think the Australian state final and a test match between Australia and New Zealand are of a similar standard. So they're playing a level of cricket all the time that they know they can deal with the pressure. They know how it works in big moments. Whereas we come out of provincials, which is probably about the same level as A-grade Super League in Australia in some places. And the step up for us is so big, and we haven't been exposed to, look, I'd imagine the last time you played men's provincial, you pretty much knew every player, what they bowled, what was going to happen. And it's a little bit different in Australia. They've come through zones and they've seen different types of players, and they're just tougher. So the Australians, you didn't have to say to an Australian player, and I mean that ACT side, you know, had Vinesh Bennett and Dwayne, what's his name? Billy Flores, Dwayne Hall, you know, it had a lot of junior, gosh, his name has gone from my head, but they were Australian players and great Australian players. And coaching them was really about, Steve was there, so they had great skill sets, and really my role with them more was to pick up some game plan stuff. And, you know, in the first year, they gave me a young player and said, hey, look, it's his first nationals. He has had some problems coming through. Can you spend the week focusing on him and trying to get him to play well? And Justin is now a world champion, and I'm not. He did pretty well. Justin Hayward, Jugsy. Yeah. The guy that hit Hendo in the collision in the UK that knocked Hendo out of the tournament. Yeah. Well, wow. That was, I hit him accidentally. It was just a mid-court collision. It wasn't like a South African thing where they're just trying to smash you. It was just an accident. Yeah. You know, he played really well, and that's really what I would do for Steve. I would turn up, and so he would sort of say, you know, this week, can you do this? And that's what I'd do. The other thing was, Colsey, that in my first event with ACT, they were really good at, because they play 1 game a day or 2 games a day. So we'd have a team dinner every night. We'd go out to a restaurant, have a meal together, depending on where we were, you know, different types of guys that organised that. But I didn't see a beer consumed. Whereas they were there to win in the cricket tournament, and that's all they were there to do. And I think New Zealanders still have an association back in that day with alcohol during the day. They were drinking during tournaments, some of them quite heavily. And I think that it meant that the Australians just didn't have a bad morning. You know, they got up. And they also were the first place where we used to do a team walk before a game. So played 1 game a day where we were playing 3. So the walk was the moment where you stopped, you're relaxing, and you got ready for your game. And it just give you a chance to wander around as a coach. You can have a chat to 2 or 3 different players and talk about what was coming up, and just start getting guys ready. And before that, you left them alone because they were relaxing and you were relaxing. So it was very different to New Zealand, where those tournaments were really intense. Yeah. Where it was just, you know, brief, play, debrief, shower, change, brief, play, debrief, you know. And during a day, you might play 3 or 4 games. You've got no chance to really turn off and relax and come back. Whereas, and again, the World Cups are based on their format. It's another thing where if a New Zealand team plays 1 game in a day, they get bloody itchy. You know, they miss the cricket. Whereas the Australians are just, and they don't know how to relax in the way the Australians do. So they were things I tried to bring back and put into the culture a little bit over here. You know?
That's really interesting, man. And I remember Harbour when we around the Paul Herman days, where he was leading us, and you know, you couldn't ask for a better bloody preparation guy. It's what he was all about, you know, and just an amazing leader, just one of the best. And we were about that as well, having those morning walks together. Just get up, just have a walk, you know, a couple of hours before the first game, just chat it. It was no agenda. You didn't have to talk cricket, but you'd end up talking cricket. So you end up, you know, what happened the night before in the game, you know, this, that, I'm going to work on this, or whatever it is. But you had a chance just to be player only centric and work through that sort of stuff as you felt like you could. And yeah, it's a great point, man. What were some of the things with this guy, Justin, that you know, what were some of the messages that you sent on to him, you know, while you were trying to bring him back up to a level and struggling a little bit with things, but he obviously helped bring him back?
Look, I was always a pretty, as you know, coach, I was always a pretty straight, direct coach. And, you know, I only sort of remember a couple of things about Jugsy. One was that he was just a guy, and he was a bit more like a New Zealand player. In fact, Jugsy may have even been born over here. I can't remember. But he just needed a bit of belief. And, you know, I had a pretty direct method of coaching. You know, he would, I remember at the first training, he was bowling a lot of front foot, no balls. And I walked over to him and said, mate, you're bowling a lot of front foot, no balls. He said, what should we do about it? I said, there's 2 things we can do about it, Jugsy. I can get a bowling specialist to come in and help you. We can get a psychologist to come in and help you. Or you can just bloody stop. And, you know, and he stopped. And, you know, I think sometimes players overcomplicate what they're looking for from you. You know, you just got to focus some stuff and you can fix it, you know. And I think he was our watch the ball, hit the ball guy. He wasn't a guy who needed me to give him 50 things to think about before he batted. He needed to watch the ball and hit the ball because he had a great eye, you know. He had a great eye, you know. And I think during that tournament we were, you know, it's the truth is, Colsey, that sometimes with players it's just a little bit of luck. You face the right guys, you bat really well, your confidence builds, you get 3 or 4 games on a run and you start to really believe in yourself. And another player gets bowled a peach first up and loses middle stump. And from that point on, the doubt is pretty hard to move, you know. So, you know, he got on a nice run and went through and played really well, made the 8 for the final in that tournament, or made the 8 for our final in that tournament.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes, because I've been the victim of that, you know, you get bowled first ball and it's like, oh, wow, okay. And it all hits you in the face. Oftentimes I see players who would get through that sort of thing as being the ones who have done the preparation and have that self-belief, don't lose sight of actually what they're trying to achieve while they're out there on the court. Those are the players that get through those sort of unnervy, in-your-face sort of moments, you know, where they're coming against the best bowler in the world at that sort of international level and might, you know, what's going to happen now sort of feeling, you know, which I'm sure all of us sort of get or have used to get. And it's those players that are really prepared, got themselves on court and gone, you know, I've done everything I can now. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, but I'm going to give it my best from now because I've done all the preparation. I've done everything I can leading up to this point, and I've probably done more than everyone else in front of me on the court. If you're in that position, like that, to me is gold. Even for players that are super talented, and you know, Jesse Wright is a great example. You know, like he's just got more talent. Nigel Collins got more talent, and the higher the level they play, the better the cricketer they are. You know, these guys are absolute, like, legit talented players. But when they're faced with in-your-face, shit, I didn't expect that moments, it's the preparation and behind that will only ever get you through, right?
Yeah, look, I think so. One of the last times I coached over 50s to the World Cup in the UK a few years back now, and Robbie Kerr was our captain. And I mean, there's a man, Colsey, he's a legend like yourself, and he's got nothing to prove, right? He doesn't need to play, and he really wanted to play that event. And he did more, and he batted the house down in that event. He was the best batter in that tournament by so far. It was ridiculous. but he just did more work than everybody else. And,
Yeah.
you know, at that stage, his girls weren't international cricketers. They were at home, and he would go out twice a week and get a bowling machine up at just out of Pairua, and get on the bowling machine and train hard. And I think players who recover from that kind of stuff, first of all, have got enough experience of knowing they're good enough that these things don't jolt them the same. If you've succeeded a lot of times in your life, you know that you're going to get out, you know you're going to be okay. But also, as you say, Guy, the really best of those players just prepare better than everybody else, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I, obviously we've got a pretty massive sort of history together, and it all got to that top level for you and I in '98, right, in the World Cup.
Yep.
And
Glass House in Melbourne.
Glass House in Melbourne, and you'll never guess, but I think I'm probably the only person in the world with some footage from that World Cup, because there's nothing online, and it's been on some videos that I had and stashed away, and I actually thought they were ruined. But I've managed to do some work with them and get a few of the games turned digital, which is pretty cool. And to go back through some of that footage, I actually went through it with my daughter, and she took one look at me and just freaked out, which was pretty special to watch, to be honest, because she just couldn't believe it. This 24-year-old dad was running around indoor cricket courts, stuffing things up and losing and getting out all the time. It was quite funny. But so let's talk about that 98 and 02 as well. So over that 4 years, and I guess I'm looking at those tournaments. There was a 2000 World Cup in England. I think I wasn't a part of that. But for you and me especially, you know, like 98 and 02 were two events very close to home that, you know, maybe not so much in 98, but 02, we really felt we were in a position where we should make some history.
And we should have.
And over those two World Cups, I do want to dive into them. But what like, let's talk about 98 first, because, you know, can you remember what sort of preparation? You were head coach for that trip.
Yep.
Robbie Kerr was your captain. You couldn't ask for a better captain and leader. Yep. He was ending his career very soon after that. Just an absolute icon for New Zealand indoor cricket. Talk me about 1998 in total and the preparation leading up to that event. What are some of the things you got told you had the job by New Zealand indoor cricket? You know, what were some of the things that you went through?
Look, it's getting appointed to coach a country is a pretty cool thing. The truth is that the process that we went through was a bit tough. When New Zealand indoor cricket, the last team in 1985, I think it was, had gone to South Africa and Australia. They'd lost 6 or 7 test matches in a row, and they'd had some internal problems in Australia coming home, and they were a pretty unhappy group. And I put my name in the hat to coach them, and I was the only nomination. And unfortunately, I haven't always been the best behaved person in the world. And the Board of New Zealand cricket, at that stage, you know, I'd coached to 50 indoor cricket tournaments, I'd made 48 finals, and I'd won like 30 of them. So domestically, I was doing pretty good, but they decided that I was down a nomination. So they'd ring up Dave Fulton and ask him if he would coach the side. Because I've never asked Dave for this, but it's my understanding. They rang up Dave and said, Dave, will you coach the side? And he was good enough to say, no, but give it to Bots. It's the only reason I got the job. Really, player power really eventually put me in the role. So I probably didn't have a huge amount of support from the board. I think they eventually didn't have anyone else and gave me the job. I was really lucky. I had Robbie Kerr as a captain. I had Shane Walsh as a manager. You know, two guys who just loved the game and brought a lot of energy to things for us. The big thing we worked on, I went and watched the Australian States that year on my own, all with Paul Knight. Hold on, 98. No, I went over there with Ty Walters, the ladies coach.
Oh, yes,
sure. And we went over and watched the Australian Nationals, and Scotty had come back from England a few years earlier and told me that they ran different to us and that we couldn't run out the market because the keeper would run at the non-striker all the time in our game. And he said, we couldn't do it to them. I said, well, they can't be backing up. The keeper said, no, we couldn't get in there either. That they just were running different to us. So I went to Australia and videoed what the non-striker was doing. And when I came back in 98, I showed it to the players and talked about, the stuff we do now, 2 steps, being on balance, perhaps 3 steps being on balance in those days. We showed a lot of Muir backing up, who could get from where he was to the other end in 2 steps. You know, he was a big gated guy. He could get there really quickly. And it really allowed us to close the gap on Australia, or to a degree. Perhaps the final was a bit different, but it allowed us to start and run more like they ran. That's one of the things I think that I've, you live and learn, right? I was coaching my country very young still, and probably still with a bit of a chip on my shoulder. And I think in the end, when I look back on my time, I spent a lot of time trying to motivate players that probably didn't need to be motivated. They weren't playing for New Zealand because they didn't care. They were playing for New Zealand because they wanted to win. And probably at that stage, we were doing a little bit too much stuff on motivation and trying to fire them up. We really should be doing a little bit more stuff on game plan. In 98,
that's all learnings though, right, Bots? Like, that's all stuff you learn over the years, man. Like, we didn't know any better at the time. It's all learnings.
One of the things, Guy, that there's a period of time in New Zealand where, I think that it's fair to say that I was comfortably the best cricket coach in the country by enough that it was hard for me to get better because I didn't have anyone that could help me. And one of the reasons to go to Australia was to get exposed to better coaches, to learn more about how to be a better coach back here. The first game against South Africa, they'd beaten us 3 or 4-0 in South Africa. We drew the first skin, we drew the second skin. And then Andre batted third and banged a 4 late and got us home in the third skin. We got 6 points out of that particular partnership, really, and cruised on home. And and we were away. We were the confidence of that win. We were lucky. We had Donkers and Bird opening, who were great players. We had Brian Herman on the bench as cover for Robbie Kerr, who I don't think went out in the tournament when he played. Finns was batting second with Kerr. So we had a great top 8. We had early in the tournament, we had Andre. We had a lot of Rob Robertson was there as well as a bowler for us. You were there as a bowler. You tended to bat 3 on that side, a lot for us. We had a really good side, but unfortunately for us, Andre blew his shoulder, and he was one of those players again where he could bat, bowl, and field to international level, and the guys that we brought in could either bat or bowl to international level. They couldn't do all 3, and it hurt us a bit,
Yeah. That I felt so heavy for Andre back then, man, because I was pretty close to him at the time, and back in '95, him and I went to Ireland together and played. That was when I hardly even knew him before that, but we ended up going to Ireland together to play for the same club. Became brothers, and then 2 or 3 years later, going to play an international event with him was extremely special. Well, for me, and forget the path that he went on to great success for New Zealand outdoor, but just absolutely gutted for him. And the distinct thing that I learned out of Andre in that tournament was that he completely forgot about his shoulder and himself, and he just went, right, what can I do for everybody in the group for the rest of the tournament?
Yeah,
as hard as that guy put his head to the pillow every night and must have sucked it up every day that he was around anyone else in the group, it was like, what can we do for you? What can I get done? Do you need anything? And that's just the character that he is. He is all about loyalty and helping other guys out and making sure that they're doing the best of their ability. And what a great character trait for Andre.
Yeah, mate. I think it's one of those things that is a bit different in the current generation of player, where that group was really tight. I remember we had Craig Foster in that group as well.
Yeah.
Great man to tour with, and Ian O'Brien.
Ian O'Brien. I absolutely apologise to Oba. I've gone through basically my whole thoughts of that whole World Cup, forgetting that Ian was even there. And then I saw the videos and saw him playing one of the games. Like, oh my God, I thought the first time I ever played with him was in 2002. And I don't know why. It's just my memory's so bad. It's horrible. But Oba was part of that group, and he was shit quick.
Yeah, I remember that. He was bowling sharp as. And look again, we just had those. I think New Zealand had those issues at times where, in that team, like a lot of teams, and this is one of the things that least changes in today's New Zealand side. We could have gone with quite a strong bowling side or quite a strong batting side, but if we went with the batting side, we had a couple of guys that were quite weak with the ball. And if we went with the bowling side, we had a couple of guys that were quite weak with the bat. And it made balance as soon as you lost a player, balance became, incredibly difficult. And, I thought that New Zealand side, we played exceptionally well. And I think we were 80 after 8 batting first in the semi against Australia. We really gave them a fight in that game.
Yeah, we scored 100. We scored 123.
Yeah, and they got past us, got 140 odd.
Yeah, thanks to Berger and Wilson, probably one of the greatest partnerships of all time, batting last. But we had them on the ropes. We had them going, but it was that Australian batting unit was exceptional. If you go back and have a look at the footage and what we put up against them as a bowling unit, which was strong, they were exceptional. Peter Schleves and Neil Hansey opening up, they were unbelievable bats.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things, we were now at the final really, and in that game that game turned. We did a little bit of damage. They had Corey and Webber batting 3, the keeper and the fast bowler. And we did a bit of damage in that partnership, and they were 92 after 12 in that World Cup final. And we were a bit of a sniff at that. And you still won the bowl. You bowled 13, I think. But they brought out, as I say, Wilson and Berger. And they'd had pretty ordinary tournaments. They just buried us. I thought Alan Wilson was player of that World Cup final. I think he was a bit unlucky not to be given it. He bowled early as well and got a wicket for them. I thought he, again, we're really lucky, Colsey, because that's the best on the cricket side I've ever seen. We were lucky to go up against complete legends, and we were outgunned, badly outgunned, but you still had a chance to have a look at that kind of player playing,
Yeah, they were amazing, man. They were crazy. We got to watch Corey Otto, the fastest bowler ever in indoor cricket, hands down, the quickest that any of us have ever seen. It's documented. Robbie Kerr comes off after batting 2 in the final, saying that's the fastest he's ever faced, and he's faced the quickest of the quick in New Zealand indoor cricket. And he was
the lefties knocked over Finn's first ball as well, who was also sharp.
Matthews.
Greg Matthews, right?
Greg Matthews, Snake,
who was sharp. Rest in peace. Yeah. But it wasn't just they just had Corey Otto who was sharp. They had a few guys who were sharp.
Yeah.
Matthews had that big offie, and he had that late quick innie. And to knock Finn's stump out first ball is, you're talking about a quality bat.
Yeah, Finn's was amazing. There's no doubt. I wonder if the pitches there played a bit of a part, because it was a made for that event in the Glass House at Melbourne. So they laid brand new pitches down. So for guys that really could skid it and swing it through, it negated that a little bit because it was a little bit slower. So it was, we go back to the poppiness and that sort of thing of off cutters and that sort of thing being more prominent. But for guys that just swung it through, was probably not the greatest of weapons. It was a little bit easier to lean on it and just get it through the field. I remember Alan Wilson just being a guy he was on the circle. He was at cover. He's put his feet on the front of the circle and just put his hands on his knees and didn't do anything else. He just waited for the ball to hit him. And the bowlers just bowled to that place, and the baller just hit him in the body. We'd run because we were just so Neanderthal about it. And it's a great shot. Let's run. That's a good effort. And it's bounced right in front of Willow, and he would just tap it in for an out. It's just a different style. And you're right, man. Absolutely, just a privilege to have played against Greg Matthews, one of the greatest Australian cricketers of all time. An absolute legend, an amazing guy. If you ever got to sit down with Snake, just a really genuine, down-to-earth guy. Didn't have that Aussie sort of stuff that Kiwis often don't like so much. Greg was a really down-to-earth guy, and I'm privileged to have met him, privileged to have played against him as well. And just really, really cool.
Yeah, I agree,
2000.
mate.
Go on.
In that 98, mate. I went over and watched the Nationals, the Australian Nationals, like I said, and in that game, an injured New South Wales captain, Steve Connors, I thought he wasn't going to be able to play, and he played the final, and New South Wales upset Queensland in a massive upset, and he was amazing. and sat on the bench in the World Cup final. And, you know, that performance in that Australian state final would be as good as I've ever seen from any player. And he was another guy at cover, apart from he was twice the size of Wilson. He was just massive with big arm span. Boy, they had some good players that side. They really did.
Yeah, Steve Connors played that semi against us where it got quite close. Well, it didn't in the end, but we ended up getting runs, and we did a little bit of damage to Steve with the bat. Not a huge amount, but in terms of that sort of level, we did okay. And he was the one dropped for Corey in the final. They wanted to play Corey.
Yeah.
With Dave Lewis, the coach, was really, I think he was really motivated to wanting to play Corey as a real big strike weapon. They knew they could get him through as a batter. He wasn't the worst bat in the game. Geez, he could play. And he could definitely fill a gap at back sticks or on the line as well. So they could really massage him into the rest of the game plan, but they had that weapon as a bowler.
It's one of the things that's really different about Australian coaches, and I think this is different from any New Zealand side I've ever seen. But Australian teams will almost always make a change between winning a 1-2 semi and a final. There's always a change, and that you know, that they clearly go in with a plan, and they clearly believe that their squad is good enough, and they give a guy an opportunity in the 1-2 semi, and they replace him in the final with somebody else regularly. It happens all the time, and the Corey thing caught us off guard in '98 because we didn't expect it. He was still very young. He'd come in late. Someone pulled out. I can't think who, but he didn't make the original squad. And he'd come in late. But boy, to say, Colsey, that was. I remember you were sharp. But Corey probably had half a yard on you. I remember you bowled really well in that tournament, but he was quick.
No
doubt. I guess, yeah, you know. So again, they had great depth. They had, again, best side I've ever coached against by a mile. And you know, I didn't even think we did. I think that, again, with the knowledge you have now, you'd change some of the things you did around the links we bowled. But for the knowledge that we had there, we came up with some pretty good game plans for them, and they still just hurt us, you know.
So, great point, man, because, you know, I've been privileged to be able to have a look at some of the footage. When guys like myself, Finns, Rocket, who had a bit of heat behind him, especially when he was full and quick, Andre, when we went full, we actually did a little bit of damage. We'd actually dot it up, or we'd nick around the corner. But then when we were short of that, just short of it, we were fodder. It didn't matter how quick we bowled. So you're right, man. Like, it was really about execution of length, probably more than line. Now it's more. I'd probably have to check myself on that. But back then, you know, I think if we had thought more about those lengths and not being afraid of pitching the ball up, Harbour's been really, like, if we have a look at today's game plan in New Zealand, you know, Harbour's been really successful, you know, blessed with bowlers, but we've been really successful when we've bowled fuller. The fuller we bowl, the more successful we are. There's no doubt about it. If we bowl shorter, it hurts us as a unit, you know. And yeah, it's things, again, it's just learnings about you know, how things work, and we could have done things a little bit better back then. You know, it's interesting.
I thought it was the Trans-Tasman a couple of years ago now in Palmerston. I thought it was really interesting to see the clash of styles. The Australians bowled full at us so we couldn't bounce them, and we bowled length at them so they couldn't drive us. And so we both bowled at each other's strengths. You know, that you know, New Zealanders these days, we like to get the ball full. And you know, it's interesting to watch the clash of the styles of the two sides. And you know, again, I think New Zealand's really well served, and I think this break from indoor cricket will do New Zealand no harm. But interesting to watch the clashes. They bowled full at us for the first game. We just banged them to the back quite regularly, you know, and then they'd adjust. And it is they didn't want us bouncing the ball, and we didn't really want to bounce the ball. It's interesting how this has come through. The links in indoor cricket for mine are still the most important part. You get your links right into it, you're quite hard to play, you know. I don't think line is, you know, bowling at the bodies, you know, quite a, you know, you're only just outside off stump, but I think links are really important.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's field set then becomes so much the next part of that. if you're going to bowl a certain length, your field set has to be absolutely bang on, and then you have to have the right fielders in the right places, and that might mean that your best front court fielder, who's just got the best hands in the game, might end up at leg side line because
I think that
they're the ones that end up going to take that ball more often because you're bowling at a certain length.
Yeah, I think that it's I guess when you coach for a long time, I think you're going to have, I guess, quite set opinions, but I think line fielding is most misunderstood stuff in New Zealand. Yeah. If you're going to bowl full, lines have got to get to the middle and stop the drive. Yeah. And if you're going to bowl length, guys have got to get wide and look for the run out off the net. But if you bowl full and put your lines wide, you're going to get punched through that hole all the time. And we don't get our line fielders in the right place for mine often enough.
If you've got a line fielder set up to try and stop a down up three, that's not the fielder's job. Like, you've bowled in the wrong spot.
Yes.
You're setting up your line fielder straighter to stay low and take the ball driven to you low, either off the net or direct, for you to execute to the pins. If you've been down up three because your fielder's straight and low, that's the bowler's problem. It's an execution issue. That's not because of your fielding placement. If you're going to be bowling full, you are more than likely, by a good player, they're going to try and drive you for 4s and 5s.
Yes, and you need to play the gap. And the other thing you do when you do that is you also, you can bowl full and really wide indoors, but most guys who are bowling full are bowling straight. So if you're going to bowl full and straight at a guy, you want to plug the straight shot. And if they want to try and play across that and hit you through the leg side, 4 down up 3s around that down up line, they take on more risk because they're playing across the line of the ball. So if you're going to bowl full, you're probably going to bowl straight, and you need to plug that gap. And New Zealand line fielders, and look, it's one of the things that I did talk to the ACT guys about when I was coaching them over there. They had a very good line fielder, but he liked to be wide. And every time anyone bowled full, they'd smash it between him and back six to the back net. And I was always like, you can be out there to these bowlers, but to these bowlers, you want a different job to do. And I think there's a bit of subtlety around the tactics of the game that, and this is our fault as coaches, but I don't think it's into the culture yet. I don't think it's quite understood enough by the players yet.
So we've broached through 98. That was for you and me, especially as a connection. That was a real beast in our indoor cricket life, right? It's a massive event. I think we both look back on it in absolute appreciation for what we went through. We gave it our best for what we were there for. There's no doubt about that. 2002, man. That was a different kettle of fish. It was in Wellington. Played on courts that we were both really familiar with down in Wellington WIS, Wellington Indoor Sports. Beautiful setup. Walk me through that as a coach leading up to that, man. Like, you selected your side. What were you trying to achieve with that side? What were your plans?
I think that by under cricket standards, there was we'd been to South Africa in 2000. South Africa went to in 2000.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
Over there, we had a lot of. I particularly had a lot of problems with food poisoning. I've been really unwell after a lot of that tour. Brew was good enough in the middle of the night one night to go and give me some Gatorade from down the road from a petrol station, which we weren't allowed to go out, but because we were in South Africa, I had to be safe. Brought it back, took a swig of the Gatorade, spat it out. The Gatorade had gone off, so he gave me rotten Gatorade to fix my rotten stomach. But I hadn't been great, and in 2002, I sort of did 2000 because no one would coach it. There just wasn't anyone to go. So I did it in 2002. Robbie sort of came in and helped out, and he coached the side and I assisted him, or we co-coached something along those lines. I remember in the build up to it was clear there was a home World Cup and there was a lot of pressure on it. I think in truth, the provincial final, sort of similar to 2017 really, the provincial final really changed things for us. So we probably had some plans, and then we probably had a lot of Northern Region players in our squad. And then in the provincial final, Wellington came in and absolutely annihilated them. Calkin bowled unplayables. I think Northern Region lost that final by sort of 120, 130 to 20. It was an absolute smashing. And, one thing we'd always said is that, I'm a big believer in there's two things I like to do when I select. I like to watch guys last game in a tournament. Because the way you play in the game your team gets knocked out in tells me a lot about how you're going to fight when we're struggling. So I love to watch guys in the game that team has to win to stay in. I'll go down and watch players specifically in that game because he's under pressure and I want to see how hard he'll fight for his team. But I also like guys that, and I like guys who play well under pressure. So guys who play well in big provincial finals or big finals, they get a big tick from me. And that probably changed the balance of our side a little bit because Wellington, I mean, it's a pretty classy Wellington side. They had Graham Murray, Mark Calkin, Lee Kelly, Ian O'Brien, and
Craig Foster. You keep listening, mate. Keep it going.
So I don't mean to go mess the goon out. He's a good man. And look, I have a lot of respect for Craig Foster. You know, he's a guy that didn't do well for me as a coach from a selection point of view. He missed a lot of events that he was very, very close to, and not always, you know, the way it works, not always on my decision. But Goon and I have managed to keep a positive relationship through it all, and I know how hard that is for people, you know. So I have a lot of respect for him that he hasn't taken a grudge and trashed us out on social media. You know, he's
not his personality, though, man. That's not what he's about, man.
Yeah, I agree. He's just a good man. But so Wellington smashed Auckland, and it caused us to look at a few of the 50-50 decisions and change our mind. And because the Wellington players had really stood up. Have we lost connection?
No, we're still there, mate. So you would have made that that decision over a couple of hours between the final and you selecting the side that night.
Yeah, so often going into a provincial final, you've got a squad. You know, you think you've got your squad. But I used to like to watch those games. I always felt there was a lot on them for big players, and I wanted to see who could play well in those games. It might have been an Australian Open standard, but actually at that stage, they were two very good sides. And it probably impacted us a little bit around selection. And we went to that tournament and, you know, to be honest, it went very much to plan. We went along really nicely. And I think one of the things that happened is, and I can't remember why we did this, but in the 1 versus 2 semi, was it a 1 versus 2? I think it was a 1 versus 2 semi. We decided to give some of our bench a run, which when I look back on that, I've got no idea. Maybe it was the last round play game. Actually, it was a 1 versus 2 semi. And not give some of our bench. We want to give some guys an opportunity. And we smashed Australia. And I think
Corey, you played Corey Todd, and Corey Todd played a game for the ages.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
He batted in a partnership and scored 50, and was absolutely incredible, and was an absolute legendary partnership.
And he came from a place of being, you know, he was a great cricketer and he deserves to be in our squad, but we weren't going to play him in the final. And then the decision was, you know, what are we going to do? And I think, and I touched on this earlier, one of the big problems for us was that from memory, we played that 1 versus 2 on a Friday night, and the final was on a Sunday. So Australia came in on a Saturday and played their semi-final against South Africa and beat them. South Africa, they went there. They came and played their semi-final, won it, you know. And we saw them going to train on that Saturday. They were ruined, you know. Mentally, they were in a hell of a lot of trouble, but I think possibly in the end, you know, we possibly didn't get our weight right, and that Australian side bounced back hard. And it was the first time that Ross Gregory coached Australia. Yeah. And while I'd seen him coaching Victoria, I didn't know him very well. I didn't really know quite how good he was. And I think we probably went in after the big win in the semi-final. And we played that, the Club Nationals were played that weekend. And there was a huge crowd in Australia. There was a lot of atmosphere. That Wellington place was packed out. And the gap between that and the final, I think, was too much for us. We're not used to long gaps and big moments in tournaments. And I think we overthought it. And I think we probably didn't quite get our selection right. One of the things where the 3 provincial captains came in and spoke to us before selection for all the big games. And they were very clear on who they wanted in their 8. And I think possibly we didn't quite get it right. We probably should have said no and picked who we wanted to pick. But again, you know, it's in these moments, you know, you're talking about guys you respect hugely. Yeah. You don't bring your provincial captains into your selection meetings because you think they're anything but legends, you know. They were brilliant guys. I think the the three provincial captains at that stage were probably Donks, Kelly, Orchard, you know, so their opinions, you know.
Great leadership group.
Great
Awesome leadership group. Wow.
And look, that final, I think, you know, it's a big occasion, and people talk a little bit about, you know, Corey didn't have a great game, but really, I think we were 57 in the middle of the 10th. We probably needed 65 to win, and you know, we got out to a couple of poor shots, and at the end of the day, I think that rocked us back, and then they got the last partnership because we'd changed the team. We batted the two left-handers together, Irwin and
Corey, yeah.
They had great plans, and you know, it's a weird thing. You know, you get to do some things when you're at home you can't do away, but we knew that the Australians were seeing a team list, so we put in a bogus team list and put a second one in with the real side in it to try and let them not know who was playing for us. But they kept the right bowlers for that last partnership, and they had a couple of guys who bowled very well to lefties, and you know, we just didn't score enough, and you know. And a couple of those guys who bowled brilliantly for Wellington in that provincial final didn't have the same adrenaline and energy, and just didn't become bowled some pretty big overs and didn't quite have the same zip. And you know, it was a tough loss, and yeah, it's you know, we ended a couple of Australian careers in that semi-final. We really did hurt a few of them, and but in the final, you know, they came back like we should have expected, and I think we were probably just a little bit complacent, you know.
Yeah, they weren't the strongest Aussie side, and I think that's probably the one that really hurt us. Home soil, we had the caliber within that squad to get us over by one run. You know, if you think about that's all it takes. You know, like when you look at it, we just needed to beat them by one, and I really honestly believe, and we'll have a whole bunch of Aussie guys watch this and go, "Stuff your Colsey, you're never going to get there," which is fine. But I think our own belief is that if we had the right side on that court in the final, that we truly would have had a setup where we could have really hurt them and got them into a situation they were uncomfortable with, and we could have got through and set a pathway. Hey, look, it didn't happen, and you know, we've all got memories from it, positive and not maybe not so positive, but it was all. Look, at the end of the day, no, I'll take that back, man. They're all positive. Far out. Life's got to be positive in those sort of things. And we learnt so much from it. And that's just the way it was. And Aussie, you're quite right, man. For a side that wasn't so high caliber, found a way to win. And I think that Ross Gregory, you and I may never find this out, but Ross Gregory was probably a massive part of that, because what he went on to achieve was unprecedented as a coach. And I think we've found out exactly who the guy was as a squad leader, and you know, someone who really knows our game just so well.
If I can, while I'm doing an interview, Coles, if I can talk a bit about Ross Gregory, because he took over from David Lewis, and Louis was an amazing coach in '98, so I was kind of pleased to see Ross turn up. But you know, at the end of the day, he won the big games between me and him, but we inflicted some pain on that man. You know, we beat Australia in Australia for the first time. We beat them in a World Cup for the first time. We took some big things off him, and the competition between me and Ross was he's a very tough man, but I have a huge amount of respect for him, because I could go to Ross Gregory any day and say to him, the best thing for the game of indoor cricket is we do this, and if he agreed, he would try and make it happen. And that, you know, we changed the Trans-Tasman series in 2016 because we sat down together and went, they want us to play a 4-match series. I'm like, Ross, I want to play in a series with this on who wins the most skins. What are they talking about? We need to play a 5-game series and have a winner. And they won that series 3-2, you know, but he was a man who was a very, very tough competitor, but he was a man who put the game before everything. I have a huge amount of respect for him because of that. Tough guy, but you know, and he brought that Australian side to Singapore when I was coaching Singapore, and showed in front of me what they really do. And he didn't need to. He took the Singapore guys and they did training and showed the Singapore guys what they did. And some of the stuff he did in that, I'd never seen before. So there was no need for him to share that with me. He knows who I am. You know, we've done plenty. He didn't need to come to Singapore and play a game. We had to go out to, we had to get into a bus and drive 2.5 hours into Malaysia to find a court to have a little practice game against those guys. They did it. They trained with us. They spent a day with us. You know, the Australians, when you know them, and this is one of the great things about ACT, the Australian group are exceptionally good people. I have a huge amount of respect for them. I want to, every time I want to beat them, and I want to beat them, and I want to beat them. But I have a huge amount of respect for them. They are good people, you know.
Tell me some of the things he did, man. What did he show you?
Look, it was interesting that the first thing I remember is he sent them as a warm-up for a run around the field. And, you know, you don't think much of it. But he said to them before you go, you know, carry this and carry this, right? And when they came back, he said to them, has everyone carried both those things? And one guy hadn't, so he made them do it again, because teams carry the load equally. And, you know, so when he's doing something as simple as running a team around a big outdoor field, he's still doing team building while he's doing it. And I thought that was, you know, really good. They did proper fielding drills in front of us. He talks about his batting drills. He took the Singapore guys through, you know, all that stuff. And, you know, Steve gets a lot of crap in Australia for the fact that he helped me. You know, that, you know, what, and when I wasn't with ACT, they would always ask, you know, what's Steve Hart sharing with Bots? You know what's Steve Hart telling him? And in all the time I coached indoor cricket, Steve Hart never gave me any information on an Australian player for New Zealand. Not once. He would never do it. Ross is a hard bastard, but I thought what he shared, and we went back and we got on the bus, and you know, we're playing no air conditioning, 35 degrees in Malaysia, on the bus back to Singapore, out to dinner, took them to the casino. They were brilliant. You know, so again, a lot of respect for him. I thought his handling of in the Trans-Tasman in Australia, we had an unpleasant incident during a game, and his handling of that probably saved one of our players' careers. We could have lost one of our players after that event for a long period of time. So, you know, he gets a lot of respect from me for that ability to understand that, you know, he will compete, he will push the lines of decency in that way. He will be tough, but he's also got a really decent sense of fairness about him, and I really respect it.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't wait to talk. I want to talk to Ross. I've had probably a few dealings with Ross, and shaking hands at the end of the thanks for the game, and he's always looked at me sideways. It's never been the full glare. It's been the sideways out the side of the office. Well, yeah, I'm like you, mate. Like I'm in awe of the guy, and I think that you know, the way that he's been able to lead superstars of our game the way he has and achieve what he's achieved, you can't but help just want to be in awe of him. You mentioned a little bit there about fielding. Now, this is where I think that, and I've discussed this with a couple of guys now. I think it's the one area of New Zealand indoor that I think we're a little bit behind. I think that we can match a bowling unit and a batting unit any day of the week. But I think that in terms of best fielders in the game, Aussies still have that edge, and I see it as a fundamental technical part. And when I watch a guy like Flores up front at leg side, who he's got to be one of the best guys we've ever seen at leg side. If Dion's not him or Wayne Anoka's not him, then he's definitely got to be one of the best around. And he is simply always there at the right time to gather the ball and execute. And a lot of it has got to do with technique. And I don't think that we are quite there yet.
It's really interesting, Colsey. I think one of the massive differences that Steve made in New Zealand was fielding positions, body positions. And I think we were always a great fielding side, but we were just natural talent. He came along and he really helped us to get that stuff technically right. But I would suggest to you, in my experience, that Wayne Anoka is a better leg side fielder than Matt Flores. But in the game we play today, Matt Flores is the difference. And what Matt Flores has, he has a massive arm. And in the past, that massive arm would have been used to run the striker out. But what that massive arm does now is put the non-striker under a lot of pressure. So you can't back up against them, because even if your mate hits it, if you back up, you get turned around and fly a speech at that end. And we just don't have an arm anything like that, you know? So he's good at all of his game, but his arm to the top is causing our non-striker a lot of problems. If you do back up a little bit, he kills you. And if you don't back up, he beats you at the keeper's end. So for mine, Floss is possibly the difference between the two sides at this point. He really, you know, they have a lot of good players, but for me, he dominates the modern day game. And, hopefully 2 years away from the game, he's saving up to buy a house or something. He won't be back for a little while. You know, hopefully he's having a bit of a break.
Nah, man, I want to keep seeing him play. He's amazing.
Again, when we were coaching New Zealand B, I can't remember what we were called, New Zealand B, in the last World Cup in New Zealand, where Steve and I coached them. Matt was over early, and he came and trained with us. Again, don't tell Ross. If you're listening, just beat that part out. Don't tell anyone. But,
I ain't bleeping that out.
I having coached ACT, I met, obviously Billy, and I know Billy very well, and I thought Matt's, again, the problem we have is that I think our body position is good. I think what we ball in hand is good, but we lack the power. And that appears to be, to me, because we don't do the Swiss ball stuff anymore. So we don't have the core strength that Matt Floss has, where you're fielding on Swiss balls and drills, kneeling and standing, and building the core to build the power. And his arm compared to ours, I reckon Floss would have the ball there. We just have a third of the distance to go. His arm is that much bigger than anyone in the New Zealand sides.
Yeah.
The calling now,
I reckon
really important.
Sorry, go on.
With the calling now, right? With calling no off the body a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Leg side has become a far more important position around putting pressure on the running plan. You can't actually put pressure on the running plan almost anywhere else, but leg side can put pressure on the running plan. It's never been a strength of New Zealand. As hard as we've worked on it, boy, he does us some damage in there.
I tend to want to challenge you on it, because I think that I see Matt's footwork being very baseball-like. Like baseball fielders are incredibly technically, like we don't see it as just general enthusiasts watching it or what, the guys are absolutely incredibly technical in the way that they throw. Their footwork is absolutely paramount. Like if you get that an inch wrong, you're going to be out of position. And I think that this is one of the beautiful things that Hendo's sort of moving towards. And I don't think that we're sort of grasping it well enough, is that footwork, speed, when you're gathering the ball, at the time that you're taking the ball in your hand, your feet are already set, ready to go, so that your hips can drive you through the movement. Doesn't matter where you are. If you're in front court, it's all short arm movement, obviously all from the elbow. It's no use anything from the shoulder. From line fielders, then it's more you're going to get more power out of hip rotation, but it's never really ever out of shoulder. If you're leg side, I might challenge that a little bit, that you're going to be using more shoulder for that distance. So you're 20 meters, maybe 18 meters away. So you need to be more whippy, but it's going to be footwork, foot placement, and hip rotation to be able to release the ball at speed, and also have speed through the air. I don't think New Zealand fielders have grasped that just yet. I don't think they're quite there just yet. I see Victor at leg side for New Zealand. I think he's fantastic there for New Zealand. He has great touch work to the keeper. But I think even he could look at some work about how we could get that decision making. I hate to call Victor out here. I'm not calling him out. He's the guy there at the moment for us, for our country. But for any leg side fielder, can you get in a position where you make a decision before you've grabbed the ball about which end you're going to, and your feet are setting you up for the execution?
I think that's fair, Guy. I mean, you've got to, it doesn't matter how big your arm is if your release is slow, right? You've got to be in position to do it. Is that Hendo batting in the background?
Yeah.
Is that Hendo?
Yeah.
Looks a lot like him. I think that the footwork stuff is cool, Guy. I think one of the things is that all cricket skills start with feet. You know, I guess your head leads your feet to some degree, but if you don't get the technical stuff right in big games and big moments, guys will beat you. And look, Victor, I agree. I think possibly Victor's a bit of work to do on the positioning. I don't think he's quite where he should be at times, but he's got a great flick and he tries to set that up. But, you know, I think that a really good international player, a really quick international player could run Victor's arm down. And I don't think that a really good international player can run Matt's arm down. And,
right.
you know, the option is to put Parrott over there. And he's another good, much bigger presence, big guy. Has a you know, he's great in the air. He's probably the best up high.
Corey Parrott,
I don't think he has the arm to hold a non-striker. So when we were playing, keepers held the non-striker. But in Australia, leg side fielders are holding the non-striker.
Hmm.
And
Mate, I'm going to go
back up more.
Technique in fielding for me is it's never been more paramount than now. I think that New Zealand cricketers have just run for too long on ability and talent in a certain area. And I can't help thinking that if we had like a baseball coach from America come along, he would just recognize things that are amiss and go, that guy can't field there. You know, you can't have that guy field there for what you want him to execute. You can't have that guy there. He needs to be up there because what he can do there, see his feet, how they move, he's better off there. And I think that it's a massive area we could get really ahead of the game in. And yeah, I'm not on, you know, I've got no talent in that area. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an expert in any of this shit. It's just something that I'm wondering whether maybe we can leap forward in.
Look, I think it's one of the things, Kelsey, that you know, I've always been a bit of a fan of trying different things. And but we brought Patrick Shannon in to work with the New Zealand side when I was involved with Steve, and now he's done quite a bit of work with Hendo, I understand. And look, it's not baseball, it's softball, I think, his history. But he is a guy that should be helping us out with our throwing skills. But look, bringing in somebody, look, I don't think it needs to be a massive American baseball. It needs to be a biomechanic who specializes in throwing, right? Who can tell us this stuff. And you know, I'm a big fan of trying it all. Look, one of the things that Hendo bought many years ago that I really liked, we did a bit of stuff with weight belts submerged in pools, so we could do resistance training for fielding. So we'd literally have guys put a weight belt on, go underwater and practice the bowling action. So it could be, so you could find, because the way you find speed in the world is resistance training, but you can't resistance train a bowling action. You can't resistance train throwing. But if you put someone on a weight belt underwater, you provide resistance to their motion, and that can over time boost power. And I think we're lacking in upper body power compared to the Australians. So I think you know, there's a lot of getting an expert to come in and talk throwing makes a lot of sense to me. And I know they used Mark Sorensen for a little while back years and years ago, right?
Yeah.
But having someone else come in can't do us any harm. And I think, look, I remember, you know, we did trainings. We had Rob Orchard come and teach our guys how to dive. We had Patrick come in and talk about throwing, and that we had you come and talk about bowling off colour. Right? We did a bit of stuff up in Auckland, one of the training squads, where we had 4 different experts come in and talk to our guys about 4 different things. We broke them up and moved them around in sections. And I like that kind of stuff, Colsey. You know, Tani picked up your off cutter, and we did town with it for 2 years, and was just, you know, he was bloody useful with it. And it's not everybody's answer, but if one guy picks up one thing out of those sessions, it can make a massive difference for you. And so I like that kind of approach. And one thing I think we agree on, Guy, is that whatever the reason, New Zealand needs an answer. We need to be we need to be able to get, at the moment, they're able to take outs that we can't take, and that hurts us.
Well, I've got an answer. See, the problem I've got, like, because I've been a part of some of that stuff where we've got experts in for 2 minutes and give us some expert advice. And I've also been the one giving the advice as well for 2 minutes. And I say that facetiously, but that sort of stuff needs to happen in April.
Yes.
And
right.
8 months later, you have a World Cup final. And you've had that amount of time to take on the new knowledge, knowing that you don't have to try and turn over that knowledge in a camp just before your World Cup event, your massive event of your life, to try and become a slightly different player. Because the messages that should actually have been sent to you being selected for New Zealand is that your game is good enough to play international level and win a World Cup final. Now we just have to get a couple of other little bits and pieces right. We have to get you in the right environment, batting with the right person. We have to get you in the right game plan. But your talents and abilities as a player are the best that we have got in our country. Not, we think you've got some ability to get better. Here's some things to take on board to get that. And now good luck, go and play against Australia and win a final. And it all happens within 5 minutes. And that's, look, you can argue that that was the format that we had and that's just the way it is, but possibly one of the learnings is for future setups and squads is that things are set up earlier.
It's one of those things, Colsey, which my recollection is we brought you guys in before the 2016 Trans-Tasman and we had a 2017 World Cup. But my recollection of 2017 is we decided from a budgetary point of view, instead of having a lot of training camps in New Zealand, to get to Dubai a couple of days earlier and do some training over there. That around leave for players, it was easier to have them take less training camps and more time together where we were going, right? And that, again, that does change what you've got to do because you can't be improving players in Dubai just before a World Cup. But I think the cricket is a different skill too, Colsey, where, and look, as you know now, I'm a foreign exchange trader. I teach people how to make money from trading in different markets, do a bit of crypto now.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned from sport, which I tell them all the time, is that if you break your performance up into 4 areas, right, and you score those 4 areas out of 100, there'll be one that's really good, 2 that are average, 1 that's a bit poor, and you'll be regularly practicing the one that's really good. And the quickest way to make, because you're confident, you like it, you feel good when you do it, you want to do it more, it's all positive for you, right? But if you do some work on the area which is your lowest, you'll make the fastest progress as a player overall.
That's awesome. That's awesome insight.
When you bring players into a New Zealand side, I think one of the things you can be saying to them is, yeah, look, we love you as a player, but this is the area of your game that I think could still do with some work. Yeah. I think that's okay. I'm not saying you're not good enough. You're just saying that if you can make some progress here, we can make progress quickly. And look, obviously I'm in these, I've had my time inside these processes, but one of the toughest parts is budget, leave, time frame clashes, dating up. I like personally to have 3 training camps in New Zealand before we go away on different weekends, right? But we're already asking these guys for a lot of money. Training camps have got to be paid for. They're already taking their annual leave to go to the World Cup. They've got to take more leave for it. So it does become quite complicated. You know, we stayed in a campground in Auckland, an event you went to. And one of the guys, we had them in 8 people chalets, and one of the guys snored and no one slept. And that's not ideal for a World Cup preparation event. And these are the things where budget does impact. You know, these are the little guys who just picked up a decent whack out of the crypto coin charity that I run. So it should bring a bit of extra money in for them in the next couple of years to help them. You know,
you can never underestimate the drive of the player though, and what they will do to try and make things work as well. Because understand, and I used to have that naive attitude of, hey, man, I've got to work. Yeah, I love indoor cricket and I want to be a part of this. But hey, don't you realize what the rest of my life is? Instead of having the attitude of, okay, what's this opportunity in front of me that's been afforded to me? Okay, what more can I do? What more can I do? What other sacrifices can I make in other areas of my life? And hey, look, I'm just, you know, I'm speaking as a 47-year-old who's, you know, doesn't have any commitment to this sort of stuff anymore. I know it's tough. But what other commitments can we make? Like if you were to set up, let's say in March, April, you go, guys, we're going to have a coach, we're going to have our first camp, and be aware that we are going to give you some things. One, it's going to fucking blow you away. And second, you're going to have some things that you need to take out of it that if you haven't achieved the progress that we need you to have achieved over the next 3 months before provincials, you're not going to be in consideration for a World Cup selection. And, none of those guys will miss those marks, without a doubt. All of those guys will hit the marks. There's no doubt.
Look,
But there's that preparation for the player. The player knows the whole journey all the way through the next 8-month period. And 8 months for indoor cricket is a really cool long period, especially for a New Zealand indoor cricketer who doesn't have multiple, Super League games every weekend that are really challenging. Like Jude Coleman said a week ago on Matt Henderson's podcast that she had Super League games that were as tough as national games. Like we don't have that. Like 1 in every 4 games in Super League here is really tough, like a real challenge. And I mean that with absolute all respect, because there are tough games that go on. But if you look over an 8-month period, is there some other way that a New Zealand indoor cricketer can do the work and be laid the path?
Colsey, in 2017, before the season started, Steve and I went to Auckland and Christchurch, and we spoke to all the players who are around our squad. And, there were guys playing outdoor cricket, and we went out and watched until they had a lunch break and caught them in the lunch break. But we made a point of speaking to all the players and to talk about what we were looking for from them this season. And the truth is that some players, Victor had just come back. We had a chat with Victor, and he went away and did exactly what we asked him, right? But there were some players that did nothing of the stuff we spoke to them about, and then didn't make the side and were bitter as hell about it, right? But the stuff that we asked them to do, they didn't do the work on, right? And then in reality, that makes them a bit easier to drop, to be honest. And it's never easy dropping players. It really hurts. It's hard. It's hard for them and it's hard for you. But I think one of the things you're talking about our generation, and that's how they worked. The modern day generation of players is complete. It's one of the great things. I would love coming back in 2016, 2017. I was so lucky I had Andre, who's the new pin-up boy for outdoor cricket on how to communicate. He's just changed the world. He's amazing. I don't think people in New Zealand know that guy's got
they don't. They don't. I don't.
Best bowling average of any New Zealander in first-class cricket. He averages just over 20. Richard Hadley's the only player with a better bowling average.
How cool is that? How cool is that?
Yeah, it's amazing, right? And he comes in and he's changed the world of coaching by being Andre, by going to his things. And I was really lucky because I could talk to him and he would help me try to communicate to this generation of players. But Colsey, in 2002, we had a little email thing going around where once a week a different player would put in what they've been doing for preparation. And, they'd post what they were done. Everyone would be inspired because they worked really hard. And every week there'd be a different person who'd commit to it. And, you'd nominate the next guy. And next week he'd say, this week I did this and I did that. And we'd all read it and it motivated us. In 2016, when we asked the players to do that, they came back very clearly that we were pressuring them and putting unfair expectations on them. The way they work, the modern day player, the psychology of the way they view their role is completely different.
Yeah, so I'll stop you right there, mate, because I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it, do you wonder whether a lot of it is about the delivery to the 2002 player from the coaching staff to being the same delivery through to the 2016 player or 2017 player? In that back then you didn't need us to buy into what was going on. It was just a natural thing. It's like, hey, we got told to do this. Let's really fucking do it. Whereas now it needs to be player centric and player led. So the delivery from coach to player is so much different. And this is where Andre excels, because he puts every single onus on the thought of what needs to be progressed forward on the player. He just asks the right questions. He gets the guy thinking in the right way, and he gets the complete ownership from the player, not the coach saying, you need to be doing this.
Yeah,
this is what we want to see from you.
You just said a few minutes ago that 8 months out we should be telling them what we want from them, but you just can't do that anymore. It's a different way of doing it. And look, it's one of the things, Colsey, where I've been really lucky to coach through different generations and different types of players. And the kind of coach that I was in, not just 1998, but from 1987 to 2000, I wouldn't last 15 minutes coaching a side doing the stuff we did in those days. This wouldn't be accepted anymore.
2 laps of the court, boys.
Yeah, well, I remember standing behind Jeff Butler, with a cricket stump when he was doing up and down the chairs and whacking him on the back of the back of the league when he wasn't going fast enough. And there's another great player, by the way, but you don't do that stuff anymore. And for me, one of the great challenges was trying to see if during my time with Steve and that New Zealand side, to try and see if I could communicate in the modern way. We had Donkers come up as well. Brendan came up and did a session with us in one of the training sessions. And mate, we were so lucky. The players in our generation would have been amazingly grateful to have those guys there. And the guys today, I don't think they don't verbalize it in the same way. I think some of the magic of those guys gets lost because players don't appreciate it to the same degree. I don't think. I don't mean that as, look, the modern day player is an absolute pleasure to deal with in lots of ways. When you start to understand them a little bit better, they're actually probably easier. The old day player, you swore him a lot, but you had to deal with his baggage all the time. The modern day player doesn't bring his baggage to the game. The modern day player just turns up and plays, So in lots of ways, they're very different to coach, and it's a very different skill set. But I think that what I found in 2017 was that some players just had an expectation to be picked, and that they didn't really want to do the work, and they certainly didn't want to do what was asked of them. Now, at the start of that year, we had a keeping problem before we lost Finn Allen, who was our keeper. Then we spoke to a lot of guys about the fact we needed a second keeper, and if they could play some Super League as keeper and develop those skills, it would help them a lot in selection. And Kieran Butler worked pretty hard at it. He really did. And his dad's a first-class keeper for Wellington. He had a lot of good help. Kieran Butler did make a real effort at it. But I think the others that we asked made no effort at it. And, it's one of those things where you can say it's got to be more player-centric, but we're the ones that got to pick a side who know where we need some help. And when that message goes out, it's just not received in the same way. And so it can be quite challenging. It can be hugely rewarding. And I really enjoyed trying to learn how to be a modern day coach. It's not something that came particularly naturally to me. And I was very lucky to have Andre. I had a couple of things I did in that preparation which weren't great, and Andre managed to help me to work out how to communicate out of those things. He's brilliant. I'm very lucky to have Andre on call.
Yeah, I guess your intents as a coach don't need to change, but the delivery to the player must be different now, in that you need to get their buy-in to the message that you're trying to get them running through to. So it's a bit coercive, like you're trying to, the message of this is what we want you to, look at improving over the next 8 months is, okay, so what, I'm sounding like I'm asking to suck eggs. I really don't mean that. But it's just, where do you see yourself in the next 8 months? What do you think? What are the things you want to see better in your own game in 8 months? And you start leading them down the path, so that the idea becomes the players. That's what I mean by player centric. So that they're the ones that actually come up with the idea to move forward, and then you support them through that process. Rather than having someone at times. Back in the old day would be dictatorial. I've said that right, I'm pretty sure. And hey, this is what we need to see better. And if you don't make those improvements of the way we want to see, unfortunately, mate, it's not. You see what it's that's for me as a player of seeing players that I'm playing with and against now who are coming up through the ranks. I can see the differences in the way they operate. They are more shoulders out, chest up, and they are more believable in themselves, and what they need is a bit of coercing in the right direction, because they have got a lot more confidence about themselves than perhaps what we did back in the past.
I think that's fair, Colsey. I think one of the things you've also got to do as a coach, right, is that, and this is where Donks and Andre were amazing, right, is that I actually did a session with a player with Donks watching me, and I should have finished it better than I did, but the thing that they have is they have the ability to have the player decide what they want them to decide.
Right.
And so they go in with a bit of so I go in with an intention to have a guy who needs to become a better keeper, so we can pick him in our side so he can play for New Zealand. But they will get that out of him more easily than I can. it's not a natural thing for me to find out how to create a conversation where he volunteers to become a keeper, you know? And I don't think it's particularly hard. It's just a matter of practicing these things. So in 16, 17, I spent a lot of time trying to practice the more open communication styles and talking more easily to them. And look, we had a number of successes with players who played really well for us in that period. And we had a really good trans-Tasman. And again, I think, I think it concerns me a little bit as a New Zealand supporter that the pattern that we saw when I was there in 16, 17 is similar to some patterns we've seen recently. We had a really good trans-Tasman. We had a pretty good World Cup semi-final. I would say that World Cup semi-final won over South Africa. One of the better performances I've seen from a New Zealand side. But we really failed to front a World Cup final day. And I think the same thing can be said about the World Cup previously in New Zealand, where again, Australia, they've gone after 8 overs. And there's been a few times now we've gone to trans-Tasman and looked really good. And again, it doesn't help. We lost Finn Allen and Michael Barry. They're big losses to the cricket side. That's your second partnership gone, But the pattern, I think, is a bit of a concern to me about where we do make some progress in the trans-Tasman. The semi-finals, the last 2 World Cup semi-finals New Zealand has played, both against South Africa, they have been 2 standout quality performances. That South Africa side is no joke. They can play. Yeah. And yet in the final, we've struggled to get up and play to the same level in both times. And really, we've just bowled outside of stump and been bounced. We've made good players look like great players because we bowled wrong areas at them. And Lee's response to that is he's going to pick a lot of bowlers. He's going to change that part of it. But in this discussion with players, we need to work out how to get them to empty the tank in a semi-final. That's what it takes to win a World Cup semi-final, and then get up the next day. And it's not the physical or the mental; it's the emotional hunger. We just turn up a little bit flat for mine, and it's because we've expended so much the night before getting through that international players after going into cricket can physically recoup. They're okay, and mentally they know they're good enough, but emotionally I think we struggle to really bounce up an enthusiasm, and I thought that's been missing from the last. I think that you can go back to a number of World Cups in a row now when New Zealand sides have played really big semi-finals and then not quite fronted in the final. In fact, perhaps in England in 2006 we got beaten in that semi by South Africa. Probably didn't really get a fair crack at it. It's a pattern that Lee and John are going to have to, and that squad are going to have to address. And there are a lot of new players in there. There's plenty of new guys. There's plenty to believe we will. But I think that this stuff's like you're talking about, guys, that you can't address that between the semi-final and the final of a World Cup. No. You've got to address that a year out and talk about the fact that this has happened to us and how are we going to make sure it doesn't happen again, and what happens on the morning of a World Cup to make sure we do freshen up and bring back the hunger,
It's preparation for me, man. And it's only for me, everyone operates differently. But if every player goes onto that World Cup final court and goes, regardless of what I've just learned out of the last few games of this World Cup to make myself be a part of a World Cup final, the last year I have done all the preparation that I could have done to get me to this point. And I am one of the best prepared players on this court, hands down, amongst all 16 players. So I'm going to perform. And that gives themselves the confidence, the self-confidence to go out there and perform and execute to the best of their ability. That doesn't mean 100% every single ball. If you do that, you're going to be the player of the match. But
not just that, Colsey, it's us as well. As coaches, we've got to find answers and be better prepared for it. The truth is the last 2 World Cup finals have seen the end of 4 New Zealand coaches. Our teams haven't performed in World Cup finals, and we paid for it. And I resigned on the night of that World Cup final because I thought we should pay for it. The performance from that World Cup, from the team we had in that World Cup final, the one against South Africa, from my world class. The final performance, I felt I had no choice but to go because I thought that the previous coaches needed to go because of the last final. And we need to make sure that it's not just the players who need to take responsibility for that day. Coaches need to be really well prepared, and prepared to address whatever was going on to make sure. Again, we had Jesse injured in 2017. We had no Barry, no Allen. But I genuinely think we had a bunch of really good cricketers, and that they didn't play their best cricket. And that if anything's our job as a coach, is to make sure in a final, in a World Cup final, and again, there's some frustrations around playing Australia with Australian tournament directors, and some of the umpiring stuff we get is just garbage. It's just not of an international quality. But that doesn't excuse the way we played. And I don't mean to dog my team, because it's not down to them, it's down to us to make them succeed. So I don't think it's just about players being prepared to put their hand up and perform. We've got to have in my experience, the morning of a World Cup final, New Zealand players spend that time inside their rooms with each other. So two to a room, and they're in their rooms. And I think possibly we need to look to get them out and get their mind off it and try and freshen them up mentally. That's my look back on it, right? We watched, a lot of us watched the Colts final, which New Zealand lost late in that event. But unluckily, I think maybe we should have just, everyone wants to watch that, right? But I think possibly New Zealand into cricket as a group needs to have a look at that last day and go, well, the Australians do this all the time. They know their routines. How are we going to get ourselves so we can in a World Cup final? Because, boy, the cost of being there for our lives is massive. What it costs financially, time-wise, work-wise, business-wise, relationship-wise, time away from the kids, to not quite get there on the last day and not quite be at your absolute best, it's disappointing. And again, I don't mean to bag out the players, because the players were great players, and I think they brought what they had. But somehow in there, as a group, we needed to find another answer that got them just a little more energy on the day.
But when you coach, do you look at what's going to bring the best out of the player individually? Because you've just said that you've taken full responsibility, saying that it's up to me to be, as a coach, to bring the best out of the player. But from my mind, from the other side of the fence, it's like, mate, it's a joint venture between the two of us. I've got to take responsibility as a player. I can't just lean on the coach to go, hey, Bots is going to say something to me great tomorrow, and I'm going to execute. It's up to me to be able to bring the best out of myself, to prepare the best for myself as well, alongside as a collaboratively as a unit. It's not just on you as a coach, mate. It's up to the player to switch on and go, have I done everything I can to be in this position and execute 100%?
Look, I think that's fair for everybody involved, Guy. Everybody involved. You've got to finish a World Cup final and go, actually, I did everything I could possibly do. And look, I'm not saying that, the World Cup loss sits on Steve and me, or the one before sits on Rob and Andy, because that's just not true. But we all lost our positions over it, and I don't have an issue with that. I think that's the way it should be. And you talked about, ways of players. Every coach, I've come back into coaching New Zealand numerous times, and the only way you come back is by being better than you were when you're finished. Right? You've got to go away. You've got to look at yourself really hard, as honestly as you would look at a player's performance. You've got to take it on board. You've got to hate it and hate it and hate it, but you've got to come back better. And the truth is that I can't take responsibility for the players. I can take responsibility for my part of it, I felt in that final that final day, there had to be something we could do a little bit better that would have made a difference. And it's not like the pattern wasn't there. I don't think it's just the last two World Cups. I think you can go back to 2002. And we've done this over and over again, where our semi-final has been our biggest game, and we haven't quite fronted in the final. And I don't aim that at anybody. I don't aim that at the coaches or the players. All I do is go, well, we're not going to win a World Cup until we address that. And for me, and again, I don't get some Australians to spew, I still believe player for player we're better cricketers than they are. They just have more belief and more strength of experience than we do. And they're, weirdly for mine, on court, they're tighter. I don't think they're off court, but I think they come together on court. I think off court we're tighter, right? But these are the things that, again, I've come back to coach the New Zealand men's side several times because there's been no one else. And that's just not the situation now. You know, we've got Lee and John who are doing a great job. We've got Steve Hart, who's an amazingly experienced international coach. We've got Paul Anderson, who's in the pathway positions of Colts and deserves a chance to go back. He's won a Trans-Tasman, he's won a World Cup, you know. These guys will find their way, and we're like players. There's no point in shirking from the truth. There's no point as a coach of saying, well, I did a great job and the players let me down, because that's never true. That's my job, is to get the players to perform. You've got to take some of that on, you know. And, you know, while for me, you know, my New Zealand men's time is, I'm sure, up because of the cure. I would never come back and take a role ahead of a deserving New Zealand coach. If I was asked to, you know, coach New Zealand at the moment, I would definitely say no, because I think that there are other guys that should be coaching New Zealand. And he's good enough, and Steve Hart's good enough. And when Lee and John choose or otherwise to move on, we've got coaches.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to come back one day and coach some provincial indoor cricket and have an involvement and be around the game. But you know, the lessons for me from 2017 need to be addressed in my game if I'm going to be the coach I want to be at any level, you know.
Tell me, like, when you've watched the best players around in the game, right? The best. So for me, Billy Murray is he's the GOAT in New Zealand indoor cricket. It's only my opinion, but I think he's the GOAT. Simon Dool is second for me. Stu Jensen's right up there, like ridiculously up there. Wayne Anoka's up there. But Billy, for me, is the GOAT of New Zealand indoor cricket. When you look at someone like Billy or Dion Muir, what do you think makes the best? And apart, what's the difference between someone who's really, really good, international level, really good, solid player, to being the ultimate, being the best?
Look, I think that there's a lot of stuff in general talk about this stuff which just isn't right. So Billy Murray is the best point fielder we've ever seen. Phil Holling's a close second, but Billy Murray is probably the best. World-class bat, world-class bowler. And he's that because for a large part of his life, he played more into cricket than anyone else alive. And do I look at some of these guys, I think, look, there are guys with talent like Wayne. I don't think I've seen talent like Wayne ever since. Wayne Anoka he's just a different level physically to everyone else on the planet, right? That's why his kids just go to every sport in the world and just beat everybody. You know, they win all the taekwondo stuff. They win all the running. They just win everything because they've got what he's got. And Wayne Anoka, the ball lands in the middle of his hand. The ball hits the middle of the bat. But even then, the thing that I did for Wayne Anoka, it's the only thing I've ever done for Wayne Anoka. I love him as a guy, but we haven't always got on great as a player-coach relationship. But I made him work bloody hard, and the greats work bloody hard. I look at Finn Allen, and you know, Finn Allen may go on to be one of the great superstars of all cricket. I don't see a guy who I think that's amazing talent. I see a guy who I think, he's hit a lot of cricket balls in his life. He's worked really, really hard at it. And I'm not saying he's not talented, because he is talented. Don't get me wrong, he's a talented kid, but he's not amazingly talented. Billy Murray lived at Wellington Indoor Sports and played indoor cricket, and played it every night. For anyone that would take it, everyone would let him play. That's why right now he hates the thought of going to a centre. He just played so much of it, right? I think the players that you're talking about, I think Chris Harris is another one. Yeah. You know, Harry, who again was brought up at Bowler Armour, lived in indoor sports centres, you know, played it, you know, all the way through everything for years. And in those days, guys were playing 3 or 4 games a night, 3 or 4 times a week. And, you know, it's one of the things, Coles, that people forget about you. You played a lot of indoor cricket between 14 and 20. Sure. And I think that people talk about talent, and, you know, people will say, and look, you watch Finn Allen play the Australians by taking half a step forward and putting them on the front foot, and you think, wow, he's got a lot of time. Those guys are sharp. He's able to do that easily. But I just think he's done it so many times, it doesn't matter if they're sharp, you know? Yeah. So the guys, again, Robbie Kerr just trains if Billy Murray's the GOAT, I think Robbie Kerr is pretty close, because Billy Murray beat a bowler, Robbie Kerr the leader, you know? So that could be argued over beers forever, right? Which one? Yeah. But you never wondered. And Billy Murray was an interesting guy because he'd turn up in the first day of a training camp and be a little bit disinterested, but you knew that before he got there, he'd done what had to be done, and you knew by day 3 he'd be loving it and he would be his brother and he'd have settled in. He just took a day to settle into this stuff. Dooley as well. You know, I took on when Simon got dropped from New Zealand outdoor cricket by Glenn Turner. He came and worked for me at Alistair. I gave him a job part-time, helping me out with this and that, and he worked with us and he met Steve and did a bit of building for Steve. But I remember when he was coming back, when the door was reopened to him, you know, Simon Draw at that stage was a man who loved to party, loved to enjoy life. He was a brilliant fella. He was good company. But boy, when it was time to get down to cricket, he just worked hard. I remember him coming day after day after day after day. He was trying to put a bit of height into his jump and his bowling. And these guys, it's not fluke. There is nobody making it on talent alone, in my view, at the top level. Apart from anything else, your teammates would hate you. They expect you to see you do a bit of work. And I think people get carried away about talent. It's great and talent's important. You can't do it with it's hard to do it with no talent or little talent, you know. We've seen some players work their way in, but if you hit enough cricket balls, if you're listening to this and you're 12, 13 years old and you're wondering what you need to do to play for New Zealand, hit a bunch of cricket balls for the next 5 or 6 years. And if you do that, you'll be pretty good at it. It's one of the things, Colsey, right there. You bowled a shitload of cricket balls. You got in the pool and you did your work and you got fit and you got strong on the shoulders. It made a huge difference to you as a kid, bowling fast, right? But you bowled a lot, and it makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, it was that and swimming. So that and swimming was the biggest thing. That's where I really started getting a few comments and people just tapping me on the shoulder and just saying a couple of things. And Kiwis naturally don't, if you're doing really well at something, Kiwis naturally won't tell you it. You need to hear it third or fourth person, right? But actually, you know, if you've got people coming up to you and saying, hey, man, fuck, you're actually really getting it through, like that's a really big effort on a Kiwi psyche, right? So that's where I actually really got a few comments just saying, oh, hey, I've actually really stepped it up in pace, and that gave me a lot of motivation. So it was swimming and really playing a lot. And mate, you couldn't be more 100%. Talent, when they talk about talent gets you so far, for me, talent's just a start. Like if your journey is to play for New Zealand in international cricket, indoor, outdoor, whatever it is that you're aiming to do, talent's just the start of that ability to go all that way. The rest of it is what you're prepared, the work you're prepared to do, the stuff people don't see, blah, 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 blah. It's what goes in. And 100% Billy is definitely for me the GOAT. And if it's because he played so many games of indoor cricket, Chicken was exactly the same. Bryce Fellows was exactly the same. He played 5 games of indoor cricket 4 nights a week, pretty much. You know, he played more indoor cricket than there were games on the court available at night. That's how much he played. And that is why he became so good. He became, because he bowled two overs every game. He got used to where things were landing, whether he was vicariously trying to think about it or not. It was just happening. And then he became one of New Zealand's best indoor cricket bowlers of all time, if not the best. And he
developed a little leggy. I can notice he developed a little leggy because he was playing in-house cricket against guys who were complete shit. And if he bowled full pace at them, they couldn't hit it. So he started bowling a little slow leggy just to give himself, so they could play, right? And that turned from being some crappy bowled in-house cricket to the #1 delivered international cricket, you know? The delivery that got everybody out for a long period of time. And so these guys are all through our game, right? Watto was the same. He just lived it for a long period of time, you know? Stewie the same. Stewie Jensen played a lot of cricket.
Tony Watkins, I remember watching him just going, okay, I want to be that. That's what I want to do. When's Tony playing next? When's Watto playing next? I want to go watch it. You know, and he was a guy on back sticks with long black hair. He was 80 kgs dripping wet with a Australian baggy green cricket cap that he played with that was so raw to the plastic underneath before he bloody gave up wearing it.
Thing that might have been.
And he'd close the batting. He couldn't bowl. And sorry, Tony, but you were one of the best backsticks fielders I have ever seen. all played with. You closed the batting and were hedged your bets on charging guys and trying to hit them for 7 all the way through the partnership. And sometimes it would come off. Actually, a lot of times it would come off, and other times it would hit you in the body and just go for 1, so you get away with it. Watto was a guy you just want to watch playing indoor, and you said it right at the beginning of this fucking chat, man. Like, it's players like that. We don't see too many of them anymore. We don't see guys who just back themselves to do something a little bit different and go away from the norm a little bit for fear of failure or for fear of disappointing a coach or their teammates or the culture of the team that's been laid out. You know, I've been blasted for that for ages because of my batting and the decisions I've made. You know, and we need to let guys go on that a little bit. Just have them learn, have them be a little bit different and express themselves a little bit more, be a little bit different than the next guy playing. Otherwise, we end up with 8 batters going out for 16 overs, trying to bang it up, down, up, 2 over offside all night. You know, like, who wants to watch that?
I think that's fair, Colsey. I think that stuff, though, is going on well before our level. These guys aren't turning up for mine, not turning up at first-class cricket and having that change. They're turning up. That's been gone from them before they get to first-class cricket. And look, you know, it's one of those things. You know, I think people who are around him will be surprised to hear this, but I think Ben Saunders is the key player for New Zealand going forward. I think he's a potential World Cup winning player. I think he's a World Cup final player of the match kind of guy. But he's got some technical work to do, and he's got to be let go. And you know, he's technically just at international level too easy to get. But boy, I tell you what, of the players around these days, he's got a phenomenal eye. He is useful with the ball. He's useful on the offside line and cover. But, you know, this is the difference between the modern day player. For Ben to make a difference, he's going to get out of the gym and go to the nets and practice a lot. And
where do you see him affecting? Where do you see him winning a World Cup on the court? As a,
you know, as a closing bat,
right?
As a 5th over bowler, and as a fielder.
Yeah,
so for guys who I think can do all 3 of those things. With technically, he's got to tidy the batting up and get his selection right. But I've been one of the guys throwing balls at him and just watching him hit me for 7 every single ball. And he has got, and we've seen him win games batting last. And he had a disappointing game 4 in the Trans-Tasman with the bat late. But we've seen him win games batting last a number of times.
Yeah, I don't. No one should ever cast a shadow over Ben's game with that Trans-Tasman game batting, and same with Braden Gardner as well. It just was what it was, and none of us would ever want to be in that position. So I don't cast a shadow over those guys at all with that performance. The thing with me, like, if you're going to call Ben out, I love Ben. I think he's a really, really talented player. So then we go back to our conversation of talent versus work. Has Ben done the work? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. If he's a guy that's done the work as well, brilliant. I think that he is a fantastic fielder. I think he is a really good bowler. Like, he is international quality bowling. There's no doubt about it. Wherever you want him to bowl, he'll do a job for you. There's no doubt. I would have questions, and not because of that Trans-Tasman. I would have questions over his batting, over the decisions that he makes. But then it's in total contrast to what I've just said, is that, you know, where do you let this guy bloody get out and just do what he does? You know, and if you believe that Ben on his day goes out and wins a World Cup final because he is who he is, then you could be very well right, mate.
Mate, I'd like to see, you know, I think what we both just said really counts for him, right? I don't think right now he can win a World Cup final for New Zealand or be a player of a match on one. But if he gets into the nets and gets on the bowling machine and works, he's had the technical coaching that he needs, because I was there when it was done, right? I know that Lee's worked really hard on it. And there's still some technical.
Remember, do you remember John Webber was late call up for that 98 side too, eh? And then he became fucking player of the tournament.
The Queensland keeper I think was his starting keeper. I can't remember his name. He had a really ugly batting style.
Is that Clinton Chugg?
No, Chugg was the Victorian left arm of the quick. He was controversially out.
What was it?
the Queensland keeper was, due respect, he was quite a short, ugly dude, and he batted with a really weird style, and he was the keeper picked for that. And Webber must have been the I think he was the float for Queensland.
Webber was fucking unbelievable. Guys couldn't play him.
Yeah, he was useful.
Fuck yeah, yeah. Mate, fuck, this has been such a good chat. I can feel the second episode coming on already. Jesus Christ.
Hang on a second,
are you okay for time? We're okay for time?
Just pretty much 10 o'clock back.
You've got a 10 o'clock Zoom?
Yeah, but he'll wait. Yeah.
Okay,
I'll just put him off. Yeah, it'll be fine.
You're talking to Colsey. It's all right.
Yeah.
Won't mean anything.
He's looking for some work. He'll be fine.
I won't. I'll probably edit this stuff out, but
sure.
You know, like I grew up with Jeff Butler. I was really close to Jeff, and he was one of the key guys playing indoor cricket when I first joined as well. And I don't know, man. Like I've never really talked to him about it. I know his knee's fucked out, and that's why he never really sort of continued on with indoor. But I often wonder whether a guy like him would actually just have had the skill set and the mindset and the intelligence to actually have gone on and actually become one of the even played for New Zealand at one stage. I don't know. I'm not sure. You know, he would have had to become a better player than what he was, but fuck, he had some ability, man. Like shit, he was a good player and he was a great captain.
Yeah, I agree with that, guy. I think Jeff Butler was, you know, it's one of those things, right? New Zealand doesn't have the depth to lose players, and you know, Butler was I remember him playing A-grade Super League and opening the batting with Wayno, and I think, you know, scoring a truckload of runs, and we know he could bowl. So yeah, I think, you know, good cricketer, good guy. Probably, I think, you know, he could have been a guy that made a difference. You know, he could have been a guy that pushed in, and because one of the things we tended to have in New Zealand was 7 international quality players. Do edit that out. But quite often we were just a player short, you know, and or we'd have 8 and 20 get injured, and our depth guys weren't as good as their depth guys, you know.
When you rock up to, when you get a coaching gig, right? Tell me what's the what's the biggest thing, like on the top of the priority list in terms of the coaching, the bots coaching ideology, right? What's the biggest thing you really want to instill in the team? Like, what do you really just, if I leave this group in 3 weeks' time, we finish our campaign, I hope that I've really, really instilled on the guys?
Look, I guess there's a simple answer to that, which is just the love of the game. I hope that some of the love of the game rubs off. But really, as far as process goes, there's 2 things I do. Quite often I'm in a co-coaching relationship. So quite often, if I'm coming in to join another coach, I'm talking to them about what they need. And then I'm trying to bring that in. One of the things when you've coached for a long, long time, I like the challenge of trying to be a different type of coach. I've kind of been the batting specialist, the bowling specialist, the fielding specialist, you know, done some motivation stuff. So sometimes you look at a team and you think, I need to bring this. And sometimes, you know, you just turn up and start, and what you need to bring doesn't become obvious for a bit longer. But what I really want to do is come in somewhere where I can make an impact. And I think some coaches, they're not looking to make an impact. They're looking to manage more. They're not looking to make a difference. Whereas when I come into a side, I am looking to make a difference. I want to leave that side better than when I turned up. And so I'm someone who's prepared to try new things, take some risks to see if I can push the side forward, where other coaches who are just as good would tend to be more about maintaining the status quo.
When we look at the game and how it's progressing over the last, like, you know, I guess, look, from day one when we first started watching it together, right, or playing it together, how it's evolving, right? Are you happy with the progress overall of, you know, holistically how the game's sort of transgressing and how it's playing out? Like, what would you change to the format? Because, you know, all I hear really about indoor, and it's following the outdoor cricket mantra, which is just I don't know. For me, it's just Neanderthal in the way of thinking, right? It's just like, oh, it's got to be shorter and quicker so that we get advertisers on board and we can attract the TV coverage and stuff like that. Like the biggest argument about 6 ball overs out of 8 ball overs was about attracting TV coverage and being shorter for the TV game, right? Well, how are we going so far? How long have we been playing 6 ball overs for? And where are we at with the TV thing? We're in the same spot in my view. We haven't progressed in that. So that hasn't worked. So for me, do you feel like the game is better where it's at the moment, 6 ball overs? Do you think that, what are some of the other changes you'd like to see happen if in a perfect world you won Lotto tomorrow at 26 million New Zealand dollars? Is it 26? I think it's 26.
23, I think, 23, 24.
23, 26. No, it's 26.
Yeah. 26, okay, 26.
Yeah, I'll give you the other 3 million.
I'm still okay to take it. Look, I've thought a few times in the last few years, and COVID's kind of got in the way, about running a tournament, a prize money tournament in Wellington. And you won't like my changes, Guy. I'd like to play each bowler bowls 1 12 ball over. Because I think in outdoor and indoor cricket, we waste a lot of time changing ends or changing bowlers. And I don't think we need to do it. So as an example, I'd like us to play 6-a-side, 6 12 ball overs. So you bat first, and you and your partner, if you bat first, you bowl the first 2 overs. So you play a skin 1-on-1. So I bowl to you, you bowl to me. And so that there's more competition between the individual pairs. Maybe a point for each of the pairs. 12 ball overs so that we can, instead of bowling 6 balls, stopping, take the glove off, you bowl 2 overs, and you bowl them to a pair. So we can try and get matchups that really work for us. I'd love to do a little IPL thing where there's a little bit of money around and we can put a few names into an event like that. 6 ball overs also makes fielding very difficult because we can't condense the field in the same way. For me, I'd love to see a ball that skids on and gets guys on the front foot again. I think it makes better outdoor cricketers, and I think indoor cricket's not bad for your outdoor game, but it's not good for your outdoor game. And I think with a ball that skidded on more, it would be. I'm open to that kind of event being 6 or 8-a-side, but I quite like 6-a-side cricket. And I think that part of the reason for that is because that game does require different skills, and you can't just bang it down up for 2. If there's basically a keeper and a bowler and 4 fielders, and you just want to bang it for 2, there's some pretty big gaps you're missing. So it encourages guys to play a wider range of game. And I think guys to bowl in some different areas. I think one of the genuine limitations of indoor cricket is that the shape of the court means that there's only so many shots you can play for value. And, that's not easy to fix in our game, And I think so I think if you played 6-a-side, wickets would take on a far bigger importance. And I think that the calling, the running stuff will become less significant. You tend to be running a lot in that kind of cricket, 6-a-side, because not as many fielders. So I'd like to see one of those games and have a look at it and see what I think about it. I'd see it live. I think we need to just have some common sense, I think, I know we changed it for a couple of series, but I think still in the rules, a full toss above the waist is a legitimate delivery. And we've got guys bowling them deliberately. And, the truth of the matter is that if you were bowling them deliberately, Guy, it'd be very, very dangerous. So I think full tosses above the waist should be a no ball. I think throwing the ball through the batter's area at head height should have you immediately penalised or sent off. There's far too many guys when guys are trying to get into batting stances, biffing the ball through the batting area at head high. And we've seen the potential consequences of cricket balls in the head. It's a really, really dumb risk. I know some guys do it to unsettle players, but you just shouldn't be able to throw the ball past the head of another player.
Do you mean beamers or bouncers?
Beamers. Yeah, bouncers can be shoulder high, but beamers. They're still, technically, they're all still as far as I'm aware.
Beamers? I don't see beamers all that much really going on.
But there's definitely guys, I'm not going to name and shame, but there's definitely at least one guy in New Zealand bowling beamers deliberately. Last time I saw him play cricket, and a good mate and a good cricketer, doesn't bowl very well, but has bowled beamers in big games at big moments to get big wickets. And the truth is that they should be a no ball, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen, Because if he can do it as a guy that's not particularly good with the ball, guys who are good with the ball, you know, facing Travis Baker bowling beamers at you is, you know, that's not a game of cricket. And so I think, and I'm not suggesting he does it, I'm just saying if he did do it, it would be super dangerous, and dangerous for the batter and super dangerous for the keeper, who's going to wear one in the face at some point. So I just think it's a stupid rule. And I think there's some rules that apply to Test cricket that are indoor cricket in-house rules that perhaps don't need to be there. You know, I think there's for long, I think the rules could do with a tidy up. Personally, I think that there's not massive stuff, but I, like everybody else, would like to see a cricket format we could get onto YouTube. I don't need to get on TV anymore. I think that'd be cool, but YouTube would be just as good these days. Yeah. And we know how to stream it. The guys do some of the streaming, they do a bloody good job. There's some really good commentators. I think Cam Walter is an exceptional commentator.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah,
he'd be a brilliant.
I love Cam.
Yeah,
I love Cam, and he's so good to work alongside with as well, man. Like the guy's really cool, and he's so passionate about it as well. He's a bit too Aussie for my liking. Sorry, Cam. Shout out. But he does a great job. He's really, really cool, and you know, you and I have had the pleasure of working around him. He's great. And I agree. Like the common sense around the rules, man, is absolute. It's got to be fundamental. It's number one. And there are rules in our game that are just, to me, are just a little bit silly. And I do agree with that. And I like your idea about, you know, whatever ideas that we think might have to change to a game, let's experiment with it a little bit. Just play a game and let's just see how it plays out. And then let's just don't marry ourselves to the ideas of it. Let's just evolve around what we think might work, and then go, oh yeah, you know, that's a shit rule we just thought of. Let's go in this direction. How would it work if we did this? Talk to the players in the game and go, hey, what if we did this instead? You know, like how would this work out? And you could end up in a different place. For me, like when I look at Test cricket and outdoor cricket, some of it is really, really predictable. But it's the beauty of that predictable part, those predictable parts, and how the players play and try to change in those predictable parts that make the beauty of a Test match. To me, if you're going to call an indoor cricket match a Test match, it needs to be exactly that. It's and if a team beats another team by 120 runs because it's an 8-ball over match or a longer form match, is that the fault of it being 8-ball overs, or is it the fault of the team just not being quite up to play with the top team in the sport? And to me, if it's a Test match, it is exactly that, a test. And if you want to be the best of the best, you better get yourself prepared to be the best of the best. And I've just seen too much 8-ball over cricket to know that is the greatest format of indoor cricket.
Look,
and I've harped on about this in podcasts before, and people will be sick and tired of it. But 6-ball over cricket brings teams closer together. It brings them back naturally. Now, if you want to bring the teams naturally closer together, get better at the sport. Get better at what you do. Get as good as the best team and beat them. Find out a way to beat them. Don't rely on a format of a game of cricket to get to one day be better than them. That's bullshit.
I can tell you feel strongly on it, Colsey. One thing I'd say on it, Colsey, it's not just that it brings teams closer together. It hides weaknesses in players.
Yeah, absolutely.
So players who have an area where they're not so good can get away with it in 6-ball over cricket.
100%. Yeah.
But one of the things, Colsey, for mine, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if I watched more into cricket than any man alive. You know, when I used to go down and watch.
You'd be close, bro. You'd be close, mate. You'd be close.
Just watch game after game after game. The truth is, I've watched a number of Super League, Nationals, and World Cup games that have taken 2.25 hours, 2:20, and that is just too long. It's hard to keep your focus. It's hard to keep your intensity. And I'm in favour of 8-ball over cricket, but actually we need to get on with it. And, you know, in the 6-ball over cricket, they do I hate the time clocks. But I think if we're going to play 8-ball over cricket, it's got to be a 2-hour game. I just think, and again for that,
but there's ways to manage that. There's ways we can manage an 8-ball over game in 2 hours. I've played international cricket at 8-ball overs in 2 hours.
Yeah, I agree, but the longer we've been on, the longer the game was taking. And there's no doubt, Colsey, that, and I'm, you know, again, I've been there, so I can tell you it's true that international teams, when they're batting, they are trying to slow the game down, right? So they're trying to make fielding teams field for longer and longer and longer. So it's harder and harder and harder to keep the intensity, right? That's not, you know, and I'm not talking about New Zealand, I'm talking about lots of international teams doing this. In fact, I would suggest to you that nearly every international team before time clocks is trying to make the batting innings long and the fielding innings short, right? Because fielding takes the energy and intensity. You want to just go, right? And we've got to stop that. 8-ball over cricket for me works, but it works better with some really solid time restrictions on guys. And it's tough because whoever gets penalised, the other team can try and milk the time a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think the umpire can manage that. I agree with you. I think the games need to be set at a limit of 2 hours. That's fine. But from a spectator point of view, from a strategic point of view, from a purity point of view, seeing the best players play more cricket for longer periods, there's a reason why people see outdoor cricket, test cricket, as the pure form of the game, and they want to watch it. I want to watch the first morning of a test match against New Zealand and England, or New Zealand and Australia. It's the most magnificent thing. I ain't going to see the result on that day of watching that game. I'm going to see the purity of cricket being played, the game of chess that's being played. 6-ball over cricket does not allow a game of chess to be played in indoor cricket, and that is bullshit. And we've done it because we've had this mentality of going, a shorter form is better for marketing and for sponsors and for TV coverage, and that has gone nowhere. And it hasn't done anything for the players or development.
I've got a couple of thoughts on that, Colsey. First of all, I agree with the 6-ball over thing. The truth is that if you're playing now, 6-ball over game, you might bowl 2 deliveries in an over at a guy who you want to get out. And he gets banged on the knee twice, then goes in the corner and gets off strike. But in 6-ball overs, he doesn't get back, right? One thing I do want to say on this that I think is I disagree with is talk about the umpires being able to handle that stuff. But the truth is that in my time involved, I think the overall standard of playing has got better and the standard of officiating has got worse. Now, the truth is that for whatever the reasons were, we lost Jonty. And I know there's 2 sides to that story. I'm not going to go to that right now. But, you know, the guy that umpired the last Men's World Cup final is awful. And they had, sitting in the stands, not umpiring, a world-class umpire. And how are the people in charge of letting that happen? And look, these guys that tell you that, you know, this is the biggest myth in umpiring. When umpires tell you that stuff will be out on replay, as players, we know that everything's out on replay, right? But we also know that the camera is 100% consistent, and they're not. And these umpires that are going around to giving guys out who are in by foot and saying that it will be out on replay, they don't understand the game of cricket. And if they don't understand the game of cricket, they're not going to be able to control this stuff. And the problem now is that these guys are being rated on all kinds of stuff, but not their understanding of the game. And if New Zealand is to win in the Cricket World Cup final, we need to have not an Australian tournament director and not an Australian umpire in the stand, because really the 2 of those together, and I'll tell you this, I'm going to say this right, there's not one Australian player who wants an unfair advantage. But in my view, it is tough. And to suggest that the umpires that I've seen recently, even the better umpires in New Zealand, who are good umpires and good callers, that they have enough understanding of the game to control these things, not for mine. Consistency's, you know, again, I don't watch a lot of Indian cricket anymore. Maybe different the last few years. Maybe I've missed some stuff. I know there's some more umpires coming through, but I think umpiring needs to be addressed internationally. If we want to have credible international tournaments, we do need to have the best umpires in the world umpiring them. Having a guestie sitting watching a World Cup final is just not good enough, Colsey. He's a man who will sit, as a New Zealander, he'll sit in the stand and he will do an impartial, wonderful job. And if you lose, you lose. That's what we want, and that's what the Aussies that beat us want. And I think that this stuff's being taken away from those people. I don't think that's a great idea.
Yeah, look, John T, Michael Guest, great umpires, and guys you would trust in the box. Any game you walk on court, you'd be a privilege of having those guys umpire. Napier Stewart, guys who get in the box and you just go, hey, I'm not going to have any issues here. I'm just not. I'll just get on with my game. I know who I'm up against, and I'll just concentrate on that. That's the trust you want in the guys who are officiating the game. And I'm not going to. There are many umpires who want to be in that position, but then fault by having too much ego involved in it and feeling like they need to have a stamp on the game, whether it's an ego thing or not an ego thing. It might be a imposter syndrome maybe coming through and feeling like they need to do something just to make sure they're seen as an umpire and, hey, I'm part of the game, don't forget about me. But it's and I'm coming from a guy who's umpired a bit.
Yep,
you know, I've done 5,000 games of indoor cricket back in the day. No one knows about that. When I was growing up with you, when I was younger, I umpired a shitload of games. I umpired a New Zealand Harbour game one day with Dooley playing, and it was one of my most I loved it. It was one of my most cherished appointments, and I did a great job. And I know that I was a really good umpire. I got told I was a really good umpire when I was really switched on. So I know what it's like being in the box. And there are several guys around the circle who have just got an attitude of, it's not about me, it's about the game, and I'm just going to do the best of my ability, and that's amazing. There are other guys who have got amazing ability in the box and then ruin it, absolutely ruin themselves by having an attitude of, I need to stamp a bit of authority here. I need to make sure they understand that I'm here in the box. This is a little bit about me, and I just need you guys to know that I'm up there, whatever that looks like. And unfortunately, it ruins it for those sort of characters.
Yeah, I don't think it's even authority, Colsey, because authority we don't mind as players. It's personality, and they want to put their personality on the game. They need to let the game. They need to let the game go, right? It's so again, I think if we're going to get a 2-hour 8-ball over test match, we're going to have a way of bringing through some international umpires. And again, I don't mean to bag out every international umpire. There's some great
absolutely
umpires.
not. Absolutely not. No.
But the general standard for mine, and again, if we're going to try and run on time, there's nothing like experience, and you know we lack a little bit at the moment of well, again, people are being put in appointments, in my view, for the wrong reasons. And
so let me put this to you though. If you're watching a test match between New Zealand and Australia, right, and it's taken 2 hours 20 and it's 120 and they're chasing and they're on 98 with 3 overs to go, are you bored? Oh, shit, this is going to 2 hours 20. I can't watch the rest of this.
You know, Colsey, there's an entire generation of people on this planet that haven't watched anything that takes more than 3 minutes, apart from a bit of porn.
Brilliant.
So one of the things for me, Colsey, is that, you know, you and I both know, right, that game's absorbing and fascinating, but again, it's 20% of into cricket games. And if I'm watching a test match that's taken 2 hours and 20 minutes and one team scored 130, the other team's on 7, I'm finding the last 8 overs quite hard to watch. Now, I've watched a lot of indoor cricket. I don't need to watch it for enjoyment's sake. I watch it, you know, I'm trying to watch it to get something out of it. I'm watching it in specific ways as a coach. And you know, when my team's playing, obviously I'm absorbed, but when I'm watching as a spectator, I think that we do want to make it appealing for people to watch. And it doesn't mean it's going to get TV, but I think we also want to make it appealing for people to be involved in it. And you know, the truth is that, you know, 2.5 hours is a big chunk out of people's lives. You know, by the time you prepare, and look, I think we get control over time if we're going to do it. But I'm not against 8-ball over cricket. I'm in favour of 8-ball over cricket, but I think we let it drag. You know,
I'm torn a bit here because there's elements that you're talking about here that I agree with, but I wonder whether we need to put a little bit more faith in just what the game of indoor cricket is, and that people, if they love it, they'll come, they'll follow, and that if we've got an 8-ball over game that happens to run over into 2 hours 20 minutes and it's streamed on YouTube live, will attract the people that really want to watch the end of that game and see how it unfolds. And if it's a really close game, then great, everyone's a winner. If it's not so close, hey, they switch off early. Hey, who's at the loss there? The thing is that they've engaged. They've engaged in a game of indoor cricket. Most people who are really the fanatics of indoor cricket will follow it through to the end and understand how it all finishes up. There'll be a follow-up package with a couple of interviews with the captains or the player of the match or the coaches or however that unfolds, and that would be a great little production package of how it how it could lay out. But I don't think that should be what drives and leads the format, the best format for players on the court in our game and the development going forward. I've said this time and time again. When we're at a tournament where we're playing for 2 or 3 days, 6 ball overs is the way it should be. Simple as that. Because we want more people to play tournaments for a start, and then for the tournament organisers to schedule those games in over 4 courts, it's got to be 6 ball over cricket. Hey, I totally get that. For junior cricket, they want in and out cricket. Let's have it 6 ball overs. Totally get that. I'm all for it. I coach the junior stuff now. That's where it should be. There's no doubt about it. For first class cricket and international cricket, I want to see the best of the best fight it out in a fucking chess match. And I want to see them do it tough. I want to see them prosper. I want to see how they fight their way out of it. And you can't do that in 6 ball over cricket. 1 out and an over fucks them. And you're quite right. You're quite right. You're beaten twice outside off, and then you get one in the knee around the corner, and you're at the other end. You have to face another ball from the strike bowler in the match. You want to see that match up again. You want to see the strike bowler versus a guy who's vulnerable at the other end. That's part of the chess. You want to see that guy up against that fast bowler again going, what you going to do now, man? What are you going to do? How are you going to fight your way back? You're in a test match. Where's your psyche at? How are you going to fight your way out? We don't see that in 6 ball over cricket. It's bullshit.
I agree with all that, Colsey. One of the things I like in that is that I think that we need to understand that indoor cricket doesn't need to have one format. Outdoor cricket doesn't have one format. It's got a lot of formats now, right? Looks like rugby's going to have more formats as well, and I think that indoor cricket can have more than one format. I like the idea of shorter cricket at lower levels, so the guys, more guys can play. I think if you're going to have international cricket at 8 ball overs, you'd have to have provincial. And one of the changes for that in New Zealand, for instance, would mean you'd go from 2 round robins to 1 round robin, which means less cricket, but it means more pressure cricket that matters.
No, because you play the provincials over a week, just like the state champs. You have to bite the bullet, and you get the players to buy into it. You're going to have. Oh yeah, I get it. I absolutely get it. But you've got to make sure they're playing more cricket more often. That can't be compromised.
Look, it's interesting. Again, there's always 2 sides to this stuff, Colsey, right? If you play 1 round robin, every game matters, and that's not a bad way for players to play. Right? More cricket would be good. Again, I think you always come back to the same thing. If it's going to be a week, it's going to cost more. They're going to need more leave. And that leave is an issue for our guys. I think that a lot of them are prepared to make the financial sacrifice, but they don't want to lose their jobs. And so it's got to fit. And you're far more in touch with the average cricketer than I am these days. If they can do that, look, a week-long provincials would be awesome. Really would be amazing. I'm hoping that New Zealand continues to work a draft system in provincials. I know others don't like it, but we want the best cricketers we can possibly get there playing the best cricket we can possibly play.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And that does happen. So, I was privileged to be at the provincials this year, ripe old age. And the best cricketers were at that provincials, no doubt about it. And there were some exciting players. But I want to see more of those players, man. I want to see these guys bowling more balls. There's the big talk of these provincials this year was the fast bowlers. We've got a fast bowler club now of about 6 guys that are bowling rapid. They're bowling rapid with a burley.
I heard there's a new guy who's pretty sharp. I was talking to Lee the other day. He told me there's a new guy around who's pretty nippy.
they're special, man. And you need to harness that and ask them to do it more, and they'll want to do it more. And then the batters don't want to see it anymore. And that's a good thing, you know, like that's really cool, because it's been such a batting game plan that has championed the 6 ball over Burley match for years. And there's only been a few bowlers to survive out of it, if I can be frank. And now we've got this breed of fast bowlers coming through that hopefully they start talking to each other and ramping each other up, and they start going, who's quicker, you know, let's start really just driving it. And it becomes this special sort of thing that people want to watch while they're watching indoor cricket. Like, just watch them go and how they bowl, and they're all different in what they do. And it's just special, man. And we want to see more of that. So let's see them bowl 8 balls in and over as quick as they can. Let's see how much damage they can do over 2 batsmen, not over 1.5 batsmen. Let's see what effect they can have on the overall match, let alone, you know, just the partnership that they're bowling at.
Look, one thing I really think's changed in the game, Colsey, and I do miss it, is that I remember coaching Super League, and I was in Hamilton, and I had Gareth Irwin, who was pretty sharp. And we'd go to counties, and they had Andrew Pickard, who was pretty sharp.
Yep.
And we'd go and play Harbour, and they had Andre and you, who were pretty sharp. And you couldn't play top level indoor cricket unless you could face guys that were quick, because every team, Toddy was out at Royal Oak and Manukau in those days, and he had a yard in those days, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had Oliver playing in Wellington. There was just a bunch of guys who were sharp, and you couldn't get to be an A-grade Super League player unless you could face that. And now you can't be an A-grade Super League player unless you can face this. You know, it's the requirements are changing, and I think that it'd be great to have a bit of both. You know, it'd be nice to see an opening pair one day sat on their bums by a guy that can bowl quick, instead of having 4 medium pacers come and spin the ball at them and bang them all day long. You know, opening the batting is probably the easiest place to bat now in a lot of ways, where it was the hardest place to bat for a long time, you know.
I don't want to see anyone hurt in indoor cricket, but it would be so good to have this guy running around like Heath Davis, like you were really scared. Like there would be some fear factor about facing him. Like it's years ago that Heath played when he was super, super quick, you know.
Yeah.
And he was a guy to be really like fear factor, like what is going to happen here? He'd bowl 5 wides at you, down leg side, and then hit you in the head.
Yes,
like,
yes,
you know, and that's an X factor, man. It's like it's something that you want to turn up and go and watch, you know.
Yeah.
It's the same as Harry. Like Chris Harris would bat with Ben Harris at the other end for Christchurch, and every ball they faced, when the ball was halfway down, they'd go, come to, before they hit the ball. And inevitably every ball was a 2. Like, you'd go and watch that as batsmen. It's the reverse, you know. And there were these bowlers running around where you'd just go, I've just got to go watch this guy bowl. And there's just not that until this year, where I've seen these guys come through, which is just fucking amazing. You know, like that there's been none of that.
Yeah, look, I think that's fair, Colsey, and it's great to see them coming back through. But it's not just about watching them. Really, as a player, if we're going to have our guys, I talked about the best players play more cricket. So 8 ball overs makes some sense for me. But you need to be able to. You don't want to face the quickest guy you've ever bowled on your test debut versus Australia. That is not the time you want to face the fastest guy you've ever bowled. You want to have a guy come into you and you want to know that you've faced someone quicker than him, someone who bends it later than him. So you have some confidence in the stuff that you do. And look, we need to, Travis Baker is sharp, genuinely sharp. And, you know, we need our guys coming through these leagues and playing these guys and facing a few balls from them, because it sorts you out. And, you know, different batsmen in particular, you know, I've seen some really good cricketers on the bowling machines ramped up, and there are some players who are very comfortable and some players who really struggle. And that's an area where those guys will get found out one day in cricket. And I think having more variation. We've got a lot of good finger bowlers bowling the last 8 overs these days. It's really changed. I mean, Crooksy really led the way with that. There's a lot of guys who are useful with fingers now. And you know, having some seam up stuff come back and some genuine pace. It's nice to see the New Zealand team full of guys with a yard, you know.
Yeah.
It's nice to see the Australians looking uncomfortable with the bat against them, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. Mate, we're going to wrap this bitch up. Best players you've ever seen. Muir's at the top of your list.
Yeah, it's really hard, Colsey. I've seen a lot of players, you know.
You
But
have, man. This is why I've asked you the question, man, because you've probably seen more players than I have around. And yeah, for me, I think the consensus has been Muir along the way that we've just come up against. We had the privilege of playing against and beaten as well. And that's no disrespect. The guy's just amazing. But we've had guys in our own backyard that are just like, you know, Stu Jensen, you know, we've hardly spoken about that guy. Leadership, back six fielder, gloves of like leather, amazing bat, amazing bowler. Like, we haven't even spoken about that guy, you know, crazy.
And Stu brought a competitive toughness to the whole thing. I think when you talk about the greatest players, you know, for me, I coached a bit of men's and women's cricket. And Antoinette Spain would sit in that group with the greatest players I've ever seen, and one of the best leaders I've ever coached, you know, world class, and again, could bat, bowl and field at that level, and coaching her was an absolute pleasure. And it was disappointing, you know, it's pretty she's not still playing the game, because she was fun to watch, you know, she was a brilliant player. And Wayne and Oak is a special player. Obviously, you know, I've coached a lot of guys who are, you know, Adams, Styrus, Dool in their own way, all special players, you know. Mark Orchard. I think Mark Orchard's another one of those guys that can bat and bowl and field at that level. And he's a guy that he's not quite Dion Muir, but he can be better than international quality in all three. He probably wasn't there all the time, but he's a very good cricketer for mine, Orchard. And yeah, I guess you know, over my time, I love watching Keith Anoka play, because he was a guy that whenever his team was losing, he was going to play some amazing cricket. And I always respected him as the man that when we were in trouble, when I was coaching him, when we were in trouble, he was the guy I wanted involved. And you know, he suffered a bit from being Wayne's brother, because Wayne had all that talent, and he does have amazing talent. But Keith, he had a really good head on his shoulders, and he was a guy that that made a lot of good decisions in big games under pressure, and got teams home, and never got a lot of praise for it. I thought he was a better player than people thought. Cairns was fun to watch. Yeah, you know, Cairns was quick. He got and Cairns got bounce. You know,
how quick was he? Because I've heard that he's the quickest that New Zealand's ever produced.
Look, I think, quick? Mate, when you're standing behind a court, I don't think it's ever quite the same as being on a court. But Tony Poth opened the batting for us in those 87 nationals, 87 and maybe 89. He played on one of them. I can't remember which one it was. But Poth told me he didn't see the first ball, and Poth could bat. You know, so I'm going to put him in the quick category. You know, again, I think it's always difficult. You know what it's like, Guy. You can stand behind any bowler, and they look kind of medium pace, like they don't do much. You can stand at the other end, and you can see it a bit quicker. You can stand in the batting box, and it's a different experience completely, right? So, Heath was quick. Cairns was quick. There's been a lot of good players. Yeah.
Do you remember Chris Bell?
I do.
Shuffle?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was rapid. He was he was a boxer, eh?
He was a boxer. And probably
he was rapid as well.
His time in New Zealand cricket was probably a bit shorter than it should have been. He probably had a bit more to offer than we got out of him. I think Brendan Diamante was another one who was, you know, he had some times when he was unbelievable, and he was a guy who, when he was at his absolute best, he was incredible, and just a little bit off his best, he was only good, and there was a big difference in his game, you know. So you know, I used to, you know, I guess I'm a coach. I used to love watching Lee Kelly play, because he didn't do anything amazing. He just didn't do anything badly. He was just a really dependable kind of guy. Obviously, Colter, you were great to watch, because you are going to make something happen, right? You are going to bowl unbelievable deliveries, and every now and again you're going to run down and bang a 7. And it does make for entertaining viewing, you know. So, you know, you're right on that list of people that's fun to watch. And, you know, I could name 100 players, you know. I thought Matt Fielding wasn't. I think Matt Fielding was one of the big losses for us when we won Australia in 2006. He didn't play again because of money, and he was another guy. He was sharp. He was a great bat. He was going down. Collins was another guy. Yeah, Mouse. You know? It was a good tour too. That tour, and you know, I do think we've been lucky to have a lot of players, and all of a sudden, in the last 7 or 8 years, to have some really good coaches. I think the game's really started to develop. We've seen players come through and put back. It's nice to see Lee and John coaching New Zealand, who have played for New Zealand, and putting back in. I think it's a really good thing for the cycle. And to have someone like Steve, and you know, I think I've said this to him. I think number one, I don't think it's a great thing to have Andy coaching Colts and Masters. I think he should be coaching one, because they are the two pathway sides to the New Zealand men's side. And when we coached New Zealand, we had two coaches. We had New Zealand, we spoke to New Zealand at some length about the fact that someone should be coaching Masters and someone should be coaching Colts. So we had Andy at Masters and Lee at Colts. So there was two pathways coming through the New Zealand men's side. Having Andy in both those positions for mine clogs up that pathway. And we have someone like Steve who probably needs to be involved in some way at that sort of level, being involved. So I think the pathways from New Zealand aren't quite right at the moment, but that's only me, and I'm not involved in the decision making or that close to it. Just my sort of view on it.
Do you see Masters as a pathway to men's?
I think over 30s is a pathway to men's. Yeah, I think if you can win an over 30s or an over 35s World Cup, I think that counts. You know, Andy's got an over 35s World Cup, over 35s World Cup, over 30s World Cup in his CV.
Over 30s,
that's a big plus. I really do.
I agree.
You don't win that without being a great coach, you know. And
so you think that's so you're saying that's a pathway for the coach, not the player?
Look, yeah, I don't think you're going to make a New Zealand men's side from playing over 30s cricket, right? You've got to have made it by then. But as a coach, as coaches are older, I think winning an over 30s or an over 35s World Cup as a coach is an experience. You're dealing with good players, you know, and you know, Lee's come from the junior side, but my recollection is Steve came from the senior side. He came out of Masters back to Wellington men and Masters back to New Zealand men, you know. So I do think that they're the two pathways. If you're a coach, you're trying to get onto, you're trying to coach one of those two sides. And I think when you get there, you're the two guys who are next in line. And I think Andy's a great coach, and he for mine, Andy is next in line. You know, he'll get the next job if there's no other at the moment, all things being equal. But I think that he's doing that without Steve as an example. Maybe there are others getting opportunity to say, well, actually, here's my results at this level. You know, and I think we need guys at that level given an opportunity to turn up and say, well, I've gone away and got better. Now this is what I can do, because we want pressure on all those pathways, you know.
Mate, this is better than I could ever have dreamed it to be, and I hope there's another chat, to be honest, because there's just going to be other stuff that you and I are going to get in our heads that we go back and talk about. There's been players that people will just go, who the fuck have we been talking about? And you and I will be just going in our heads, these guys are people that should be recognised. You know, Sean Perkinson, Jeff Butler, Tony Pothin. These are guys who could play the game of indoor cricket at a fucking super high level. And they should be recognised in the New Zealand game. They absolutely should be recognised. They're definitely part of the legacy. Hey, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I hope we get to do this again. I really do, man. You've been amazing. And
cheers, man. I'm not sure if there'll be a camera there, but I'm sure we'll do this plenty more times, Scalzi. I'm sure we'll sit around and talk cricket at some stage. So. As soon as there's some cricket back on, mate, you know.
I just wanted you to know, man, I love you to death. I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. It hasn't always been 100% beautiful, but I just appreciate who you are. You're your own man. All 100% of the time, you've been 100% indoor cricket first and the game first. And you've only ever tried to help people become better players and teams win. And people can't ask for anything more than that. And there are just so many people. I've told them that, you know, a few people already that I was talking to you, and they're just like, they can't wait. And there have been so many people who are just admirers of you and so thankful for you being a part of indoor cricket. And I just want to say thank you very much, man. Like, I really appreciate you and what you've done.
Cheers, Colty. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and love to you and the family, mate. Take care. And to the people out there who are watching, you know, enjoy your indoor cricket, and you know, find the pathway for you, get yourselves to the top. Cheers, guys. See you.
Love you, man. Take care, bud. All right, bud. All right.
Bye.
Okay.